4 minutes. 4 minutes. Two minutes. 2 minutes. One minute. 1 minute. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to the school committee this evening, Monday, January 25th. This meeting is being recorded for LCTV. It's being aired live and being live streamed on longmeadow.org. If we can begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Long Meadow School Committee maintains educational policies that foster continuous improvement by challenging and supporting all children in a safe and caring learning environment, enabling them to reach their highest potential and to become productive citizens. Through effective communication and positive relationships, the Long Meadow School Committee will make informed decisions in the best interest of the students, the schools, and the Long Meadow community. Correspondence?
Yes, there is correspondence for this meeting. An emailed letter from Ms. Heather Sullivan dated January 11th, 2016, regarding the superintendent search process. a letter from Marie Doyle dated January 15th, 2016, submitting her intention to retire on June 30th, 2016.
Any visitor comments this evening? Okay. Any school committee comments?
I'd like to say something.
Okay, Liz.
Okay. I wanted to address the comments that were made from last Monday's meeting. And I hope that some comments were made from both our school committee and from the public in duress, because I was personally offended by the unnecessary and abrasive comments. There were 100 different ways you could have spoken your concerns, but you chose to use unkind and cruel comments. And I did not intentionally violate an open meeting law, and I'm sorry it did occur, but it was by mistake. I think that we all want the same things for our kids to have an excellent education. And I work really hard, spending many hours with the school committee, attending meetings, volunteering in other aspects. I work full-time in special education. And so I have a hard time hearing from members of the community calling me disgusting and vilifying us over a simple mistake. What do you call a rapist then? Our quest for a search began in early December by our search committee and procurement manager, and received 4 bids. We split the work, we researched the firms and called references. Out of the prospective firms, Rain Associates scored the highest. Rain Associates tailored their packets of information to our town, and we liked the timeline. We also were told by all other search firms, administrators, teachers, other professionals, that it was standard to start a superintendent search early, to have a superior choice of applicants. And after Christmas, it was slim pickings. We all voted to use Rain Associates and agreed on the timeline. Because we have never conducted a search, the timeline seemed reasonable and achievable. And by no means am I saying that Rain Associates did a stellar job. I am saying that any issues with them were addressed by our committee. And we will touch upon these issues later in our discussion about Rain Associates. Thank you.
Any other school committee comments? Russ?
So I didn't really take the comments of the public that way.
Well, I did.
I can understand why you might have, but I think the bottom line is we made a couple mistakes, we're fixing the mistakes, and we're moving forward. So I have no problem with the public telling us that we've made a mistake. We're gonna correct the mistake, and I guess the language they may or may not have used, or we may or not have used, really doesn't concern me. I think the point was made, we addressed the point, and we should just move on.
Any further comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move to old business. As you may notice, and for those of you who may be listening and not watching, Michael Clark is not with us this evening. He is away due to distance and has asked to participate remotely for a portion of this meeting. With that, we do have the permission, our committee has agreed to accept remote participation for reasons of distance. We're going to dial him up, and so that any votes taken will then be roll call votes for the portion of the meeting in which he is participating. So Liz, if you don't mind
No problem. I think I know
getting
how to
him
use it.
dialed in, and Sue, while she's dialing, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and present the preliminary search committee reports.
Okay. So the preliminary search committee met on January 22nd at 1 o'clock to redo the 12-2 preliminary search committee meeting that wasn't posted. The goal remained the same, to narrow down the candidates from the 9 brought to us by Rain Associates.
Hi, just 1 second.
The committee,
Sue's giving
Sorry.
her report, Michael.
the committee had some discussion on the process that originally took place and came to consensus that we'd pass on the original 6 candidates to the search committee. Meeting minutes from the 12-2 were approved, 12th meeting were approved at this time in redacted form, and the committee will meet on February 1st at 6:30 to approve the minutes from the January 22nd 1 p.m. meeting. and they know that we have to have a quorum, or the meeting minutes cannot be approved and will potentially be approved then by the school committee, my understanding. And the search committee also met on January 22nd at 2:15 to do a redo of the meeting originally held on December 12th. And the charge from the school committee was to bring forth 3 candidates from the 6 chosen by the preliminary search committee. And after some debate on the charge, on the actual charge itself, this committee brought forth the 3 following candidates for consideration by school committee: Ms. Catherine Minahan, Dr. Neil Guile, and Mr. Maurice O'Shea.
Thank you. John?
I have a question. I thought it was 6:45, not 6:30, for that February 1st meeting.
You have to come about 6:40, John, so there has to be 2 separate meetings
You're
that
gonna
night
have
as
2
well.
separate ones? Okay,
Yeah.
fine, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
All right. Any other questions for Sue? Michael, did you hear that?
I did.
All right, do you have any questions for Sue?
Nope.
All right, so the next item then is to vote on the next superintendent. After considering the reports from the subcommittee meetings, the school committee does have to revote their decision. So do I have a motion?
I move the school committee appoint Marty O'Shea as the next superintendent of schools pending successful contract negotiation.
Second?
So we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Russ?
So I'm going to vote the way I initially did, and I would again request a unanimous vote after we do that. But I still feel I should vote the same way I initially did. So I'll make that request after we vote the initial time.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. The motion is to appoint Mr. Marty O'Shea as the next superintendent pending successful contract negotiations. With remote participation, we do need a roll call vote. So,
Aye.
Yeah, okay.
Liz?
John Fitzgerald, yes.
Janet Robinson, yes.
Kim King, yes.
Michelle Grodzki, no.
Russell Dupre, no.
Michael Clark, yes.
Okay. And Russ?
So I'd like to make a motion that we make it unanimous for Marty O'Shea as superintendent for Long Meadow Public Schools.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion about this motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll call.
Can I just,
Okay.
one thing? So I do want to make it clear that I do completely support Marty O'Shea as superintendent. I think he'll do a good job for the system, and I don't want people to think that my initial vote for Guile was anything but a vote for Guile. But it was certainly not a vote against Marty O'Shea.
Michelle?
And I will clarify the same thing with my vote. I was voting in support of Dr. Guile, and I fully support Mr. Marty O'Shea as our next superintendent.
All right. Any further comments? All right, seeing none, we'll call for a vote. Once again, needs to be a roll call vote.
Liz, yes.
John Fitzgerald, yes.
Janet Robinson, yes.
Kim King, yes.
Michelle Grodzki, yes.
Russell Dupre, yes.
Michael?
Michael Clark, yes.
All right, so I believe that concludes the revoting of Mr. Marty O'Shea as our next superintendent pending successful contract negotiations. Michael, is there anything else that you need or want to add or stay present for?
Well, I just wanted to quickly say that I, obviously apologize for not being present. I'm on vacation, but I felt that it was important to be part of this deliberation because I think it's important. Like Russell just said, that we, are united on this, and it is unanimous in one way or another. And I did want to be present for that vote. I know that later tonight you'll be discussing elements of the search conducted by Rain Associates. And I know this is obviously not the appropriate time to discuss it, but I did just want to mention to everybody that I, worked pretty diligently to put a report together for you. If you have any questions or you feel like you need to table it until I'm back for the next meeting, happy to obviously be present for that discussion, but hopefully it is, it's inclusive of most of the elements and concerns that have been raised by the committee and by the community. And with that being said, I'm going to get back to my vacation, but I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the meeting.
All right, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
No.
No.
Not at all.
All right, I am gonna rearrange the agenda for one item prior to Marie's report. We have Mr. Tom Landers here, who has already worked a long day, to present us the Educational Opportunities Booklet for 2016-17. So, Mr. Landers, I'm sure you want to get home this evening.
My wife will be happy I didn't pick up the boys from basketball practice, so thank you.
There you go.
I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. I'm here to give the annual update for our Educational Opportunities Program of Studies at Long Meadow High School. Very few changes this year. What I wanted to do first is just update the committee. In the last 2 years, we've had many changes. We've had time to digest that, time to get some feedback from students. So I will just give a very brief update of the changes we've made, the results that we've seen, and then quick changes to the current EdOps for this year. So 2 years ago was a busy year for us. We added several classes. We added, if you remember, men's health and fitness, women's health and fitness, a class called exercise physiology, advanced strength and conditioning. 4 new PE classes that were a result of feedback from students and research that Rita Hawker, our department chair, had done on the needs of students, and we wanted to make the PE and the health curriculum more individualistic, more in tune with lifelong wellness. And we also had heard from many of our female students that they would love an option to take PE with other females, and there was a lot of research supporting that. So those are in full swing. One of my changes that I'll talk about in a moment is there's a change to the title of exercise physiology, but no curriculum changes. 2 years ago, we also made some changes based on to our physics program, based on the need for created by the College Board, changing the exams. So we made some changes. We changed the name of our conceptual physics to a physics class. We started to offer an AP Physics 1, as well as an AP Physics 1/2, which used to be called Physics B, that no longer exists. And we kept Physics C remaining. Those classes are in full swing. Our grades, our scores on the AP exams surpassed both state and national averages, and we're in our second year of implementation of those classes. We also added 2 years ago an Algebra 1 honors class for 9th graders. That was the first time that we had done that, and that was based on feedback from both the middle schools and the guidance counselors and administrators at the middle schools, that would be helpful and useful to 8th graders, that many students who wanted to take an honors level class, we had not had an honors level Algebra 1, and they would have benefited from taking algebra again at a more in-depth level, but they were jumping right to either Algebra 2 or Geometry honors, so that is also in its second year of implementation. Last year we added AP Macroeconomics. We ran 2 sections this year of that. That is successful and being enjoyed by students. We would anticipate running at least 2 sections next year. English Foundations 1 through 4 was added, and that was for our life skills students who needed to prepare for the MCAS exams, but it's not necessarily college prep. And it is taught by an ELA certified teacher, but it was really for students who were experiencing the need to have the curriculum go more slowly and at a really low teacher-to-student ratio. So that has gone well. That has served its purpose. And last year, we also made a change with our community service learning, our CSL class. We moved it from a year-long course to a half-year-long course. And I think at the time we said that we had hoped that more students would be able to take advantage. The feedback from students was really that if they could fit a half year into their schedule, but maybe not a full year. And we're happy to say that last year we ran 2 year-long sections and 47 students took part, and this year we were able to run 3 semester-long sections, and 74 students took part. So we increased it by 27 students, and that was our goal. So this year, there are a few changes. They are as follows. So PE, there's a name change from exercise physiology to the introduction of exercise science. Rationale from the PE department is that the title reflects more accurately what is taught in the class, and it's more encompassing than just exercise physiology and more in line with colleges are calling the class. Again, no curriculum changes, just the name change. We have changes to our summer school language. If you take it's rare that a student at LHS who takes an AP or an honors level class will fail it, but if they do, they can go to summer school. While this problem is not a huge one, it's become somewhat of an issue in the last 2 to 3 years, and we discussed this last year, and we saw more examples of it this year. Students who failed an AP or an honors went to summer school, replaced a grade of 40 or a 50 with an A. The rigor, the challenge at the summer school is nowhere even near what they're going to do at Long Meadow High School, either in terms of rigor or in terms of duration. And then they came and plugged that in. So the change we're going to make is, in the rare case that a student fails an honors or an AP class, they can still go to summer school, but they're not going to get the 1.0 bump on their GPA. And that's been discussed for, like I said, a few years, but this year we revisited it at DCC, Department Chair Council, and there was a lot of support for that. Wanted to give the students who take the class and do the seat time and do the rigor and engage in the challenge that exists at Long Meadow High proper credit. So that is a change. And lastly, really, even though it's not written in this book, we based on some discussions as of late at Department Chair Council and in the Guidance Department, and also at a recent PAC meeting, we were asked to consider to begin using different verbiage. We have different levels of classes at LHS. We obviously have AP and we have honors, but then we have a mid-level class and we have a third-level class. And even though very often we use the term legs and thirds, even though those don't appear in here in the book, we've made a commitment and we took a vote at DCC. We're going to begin to use the terms CP1 and CP2, College Prep 1 and College Prep 2, for two reasons. It's more indicative of what the courses are. They are college prep classes with 96+% of our students going on to college. They deserve the appropriate credit, and again, we're working really hard on encouraging students and parents to make the right choice about the appropriate level, and on feedback from parents and guidance counselors and teachers and students. We think that some of that verbiage discouraged students from making the appropriate choice for themselves. So, again, that's really just verbiage that we're using. Lastly, I just wanted to update the committee on vertical planning work that we're engaging with the middle schools. This has been going on for the last few years, but just to give you an idea of what we're trying to do, we're trying to make the transition for eighth graders into ninth grade a smooth one. We're trying to help them choose the right courses and levels and set the students up for success. So on February 1, an upcoming early release day, department chairs are working with middle school curriculum coordinators to discuss what those levels mean, what is the difference, see concrete examples of assignments and homework and the writing that is expected on week 1, month 1, year 1 for honors level and what we will refer to as CP1 and CP2. Almost all of the departments are getting together and spending the afternoon on February 1 on that. On February 23rd, Tuesday, the second day back after the students' February break, we're going to have our second year of Step Up Day / Academic Preview Day. We invite the 8th graders from Williams and Glenbrook. We're also inviting the 8th graders from St. Mary's, Yeshiva Academy, and Heritage to the high school for an hour, and they're going to meet and listen to administrators and guidance counselors, and we have a panel of students to talk about scheduling and options, and also talk about balance in their schedule, time management, the realities of sports and other extracurricular activities at the high school, and try to help them make the best decision and be able to see what kind of courses they can take not only in ninth grade but in the years to come. And they will go back and they will start the scheduling process later that week. And then we visit with parents on Thursday, February 25th, for our annual 8th grade parent night. And we do more of the same. That's something that we've done every year. So, there's a lot been going on for the last few years, not too many changes in terms of to our EdOps book this year, but I wanted to give you an idea of the kinds of things that are going on. We're always looking at new classes. We're in the discussion phase of potential, some other classes, some expansion maybe of computer science next year, some expansion of potentially an AP American Government next year. But again, that process takes place at the DCC level, and those discussions are underway.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Landers?
I just wanted to support your decision on the CP1 and CP2. I was at that PAC meeting. I was going to ask you about
Absolutely.
it, actually. So I'm really glad to see that you took that under consideration and made a change. 'Cause
Makes
I think
sense.
that makes sense.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks for doing that.
Any other questions? All right,
All
well,
right.
thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Tom.
All right, so back to the agenda as it's written. Marie, your report?
The central office's administrative team walkthroughs continue as we visit schools throughout the district to observe student learning. We had the pleasure of visiting Center Elementary School last week, where we observed literacy lessons. In addition, a fantastic walkthrough of Glenbrook Middle School resulted in visits to the fine arts wings, where students were developing newscasts as well as creating art pieces. What catches our attention during all these visits is how engaged and happy students are in all schools. Instruction is of high quality, assessment is ongoing, and student learning is valued. Lynn Lyons is coming to visit Longmeadow as part of our special programs venue. Her presentation, Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, How to Stop the Worry Cycle, will be held on February 9th at 7 p.m. in the high school's auditorium. This is a popular presentation as indicated by over 100 responses from parents to date. Please join us for this worthwhile presentation. The Special Programs Committee continues to meet in order to plan for Explore Day as well as to choose speakers for next year. In June, both middle schools will feature an Explore Day where students may choose to visit with speakers highlighting their careers. This will be the first year, and thanks to Bridget Dulay, Marianne Waleski, and Mary Morrissey for planning this opportunity for our students. We also have narrowed down 3 speakers, and we're in contact with them right now trying to book the auditorium and date, so we'll have more information for you in the next couple of weeks. Mark Oldenburg, our Director of Pupil Services, has resigned effective February 19, 2016. He has chosen to return to his prior job in the DESE. We wish Mark well in his future endeavors and thank him for his service to Longmeadow Public Schools. Our after-school enrichment program's winter session begins this week. These courses provide wonderful opportunities for our students to expand their learning by taking enrichment courses. Should anyone like more information, please contact Stacy Smith at the high school. Any questions? That's it.
Okay, thank you. I have enough other updates throughout the rest of this agenda, so I'll defer to Sam. Do you have a report for us?
Yes, I have just three things to bring up. First, this Friday at the high school, our Longmeadow men's basketball team will be playing at 7 o'clock, so we invite everyone to come join and support the Lancers. Also, our Pops concert is coming up on February 4th at the high school at 7 o'clock. So we encourage everyone in the community to come out and listen to a great performance. And finally, the Longmeadow mock trial team actually had its first trial today. We traveled down to the Springfield Federal Court and we opposed Minnechuck High School, and we were victorious. So
Congratulations.
thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. All right, Finance Sub.
Sorry. There are a couple items. Let's see. The first one is, yeah, I got it. Mr. Sturgic came, Sturgic, he's the finance director. He attended our meeting and told us about a new agreement that the town wants to enter and purchase 1.4 million kilowatts of solar. And this will be a savings for us over the contract that we have right now. And it's not starting up until maybe a year from now or a year from September, but it will save us each town side and school side about $15,000 a year. Let's see, we also talked about, remember, preschool and some tuition rates. So preschool, the tuition rate for out-of-state students or out-of-town students.
You want to do that motion?
I'll just quickly. We talked about full-day kindergarten and busing fees. Tom, would you like to add anything?
Or would you like to go item by item?
Sure. I'll do my best. As Liz indicated, Paul was present to discuss another opportunity. The town currently is engaged in a 20-year agreement for approximately 2.4 million kilowatt hours of electricity to be purchased from a solar producing farm up in Tolland. We're in our second year of that, and we anticipate saving approximately $40,000 a year that gets shared between the schools and the towns. The town was approached about another opportunity, as Liz indicated, for another 1.4 million kilowatt hours. The town does not have the capacity left on their side to enter into the agreement, so the schools would have to agree to participate in the purchase. We had a discussion about if we ever decide to look at adding solar to either the town and school facilities, would that hamper our ability to pursue that? And we still would have at least 1 million kilowatt hours or so combined between the school and the towns that we consume that would not be part of the net metering purchase agreements if we were to move forward with this agreement. Additionally, if we were to produce solar above what we had available, we could sell some of the net metering credits from these agreements. So we wouldn't necessarily be tying our hands to prevent us from pursuing solar at some point. I know that was a concern that we discussed at our meeting. So Finance Sub did recommend moving forward. The savings was approximately $32,000, I want to say, or so, that would be shared between the school and the towns. Excuse me. And there really is minimal effort. It's an opportunity for us to save some money without really having to do anything but enter into the agreement. Town's legal counsel went through the initial contract that we entered into, so they feel comfortable that moving forward, it's just a new development. This is up in Deerfield. As Liz indicated, it would be about 9 months to a year before it came online. They need to have their financing. Before they can get their financing, they need to have agreements in place for the purchase of the electricity that will be produced at the farm. So if the town were to move forward, we would be the last piece of that, which then they can now go back and get their financing and start construction.
Should I make the recommendation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I move on the recommendation of the Finance Subcommittee that the school committee approve a 20-year net metering crediting agreement for up to 1.4 million kilowatt hours annually.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion, Russ?
So how are we going to split the savings? If we're the ones using the credits mainly, are we going to get most of the savings, or is it just based on who uses the credits?
No, we agreed that we would share it 50-50.
Okay.
That's what we currently do with the
Everything
current
else.
agreement, and that's what we agreed to do with this.
Do we have any idea, percentage-wise, how many of the credits we'd actually be using?
I don't. Currently, right now, we're using it all at the high school, and we would probably spread it out over the other schools under
Okay.
this agreement, but we haven't sat down to work out those specifics yet. Because it does fluctuate every month depending upon how much solar is actually produced and so on.
Okay. And then the extra credits, presumably the town would sell those, not us.
If need be, yes. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever get to a point to be able to produce a million kilowatt hours in our own solar produced. But if we were, then yeah, they would have to go back and sell some of the credits.
So the only question would seem whether we're comfortable splitting it in half, 50-50, I assume, right?
I mean,
the deal itself
yeah.
is pretty.
yeah, they were approached on it, but they couldn't, as I said, move forward without our participation in the agreement. They don't have that much capacity available on their side, so they need us to enter into the agreement also. So, I mean,
It's a win for
yeah, for both
I mean,
the
sides.
entire town.
Yeah, I'm not disputing whether we should. It's just a question I think would have to be asked in regard to something like this, but
I mean, unless we,
obviously the town's, overall, we're splitting it 50-50. This is just the newest project, so.
correct.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All of those in favor? Okay.
As Liz indicated, we had some discussion about setting some fees for FY17. The first item on the agenda is the preschool tuition rate. Finance sub had recommended keeping the rate the same. We currently charge $2,000 with a $50 discount if it's paid in full by September 1st. We currently have approximately 24 students enrolled into the preschool program that pay the fee. So we generate about $48,000 of revenue that is used to offset a salary of a staff person in the preschool program. So we are not recommending any change or increase to that rate for next fiscal year.
Do you have a motion? And
Wait,
then
she has a question.
Just wanted to ask what it was before the 2014-15.
I believe we moved it up, well, it's been 2,000 for, I want to say, I don't know exactly, at least the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
We moved it up from 15 to 2,000. Do you remember, Sue? We're back at Wolf Swamp. So, yeah, it's been 3 or 4 years, was the last change.
It's a long time ago.
And I can't remember, did we talk about what we know what kindergarten costs us? Like, did we talk about what we know
Yeah,
preschool
we
costs
talked
us?
about that. It's well exceeds the amount that we collect because it is a peer model program. So we currently have about 48 students in total in the program. It's for students who are 2-9 who receive services. So it's, I didn't have a number for you
Doesn't
back
matter,
then.
But it's like
It's well exceeds whatever
a few
tuition we bring in.
$100,000
Yes,
probably.
definitely.
Do we get any funding from the state or?
We have a small grant, two small grants. I think in total they don't exceed $25,000, so it's actually really small. We use it to offset some supplies.
But I think the question would be, how much did this subset of the group cost? And really it would be hard to figure that out because it's a program.
Yeah, it really would be difficult to, I mean, unless you're just using like a straight formula of staff and take out some of the direct service providers, but just the overall teaching staff, it still will be well above the 48,000.
But this is comparable to other public schools in the area. Is that kind of how you came up with the number?
Well, not even public schools. I think we've just looked at other preschool programs around.
Okay.
I don't know, Sue, I don't know if you can speak to any of the other public schools and what, if they charge even.
Some don't even charge for it, yeah. I haven't been up on it a couple of years, so I'm not sure what folks are charging these days. But I do know there was an email going around for people services directors about, if our class is covered, we're covered by the tuition. And I looked at it briefly, and it's probably 15% of
I don't think it ever would. I don't.
no, you have to have it be absorbed.
It's not set up for that, really. I mean,
Yeah.
it's-
So should we make a motion?
Mm-hmm.
I move on the recommendation of the Finance Subcommittee that the school committee set the tuition rate for 2016-17 school year to $2,000 and offer a $50 discount if tuition is paid in full by September 1st, 2016.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Okay.
The next fee is for the tuition rate for out-of-state students. The state allows for a tuition up to your per student expenditure amount. The most recent data that is available on the DESE website is FY14, and our per student expenditure was $14,000 Our current tuition is $13,450. We have not had a out-of-state tuition student for the last 2 years. I think FY14 was the last time we had a student enrolled in the program. We did raise the tuition rate for FY16 to that $13,450. We felt it was an ideal time. We didn't have anybody enrolled in the program, so nobody who currently was attending Long Meadow schools through the tuition program would have been affected. We do have a student, I believe school committee approved at our last meeting. We will notify them if this, whenever the rate is set, that what the tuition rate will be, although they were notified, Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, that this year's rate was the $13,450, but they were told that there is a chance that it would change. So
Right.
Finance Sub did discuss it and made a recommendation to move it to $14,000 for the FY17 school year.
Based on the fact that our per pupil spending is, as of FY14, was $14,008. Okay, yeah.
If there's any discussion.
I move on the recommendation of the Finance Subcommittee that the school committee set the tuition rate for out-of-state students for the 2016-17 school year to $14,000.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Okay.
The next fee that was discussed is the bus fee. As you recall, this year we went through a review of our transportation, our busing routes and offerings, and we're able to expand it to Williams this year. We also increased in FY16 the bus fee from $175 to $225. We have about $30,000 in revenue that has been received so far this year. Back when we had the transportation subcommittee, there was some discussion about looking to, keep it so that we're not having large increases. So Finance Sub recommended a $10 increase to $235 for next fiscal year, with a family cap of 2 riders or $470 per family.
Okay. So I move on the recommendation of the Finance Subcommittee that the school committee set the bus fee to $235 per rider with a family cap of $470 per family effective 2016-2017 school year.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Russ?
So we're in a situation where we're still not covering it, but we have a fee that covers part of the cost.
Yeah,
Is that the
you,
idea?
yeah, our transportation,
Quite a
again,
fee.
that fee would be very exorbitant in order to cover the actual cost to provide transportation.
Okay.
And Tom, I think you had said at last meeting that our transportation fees were going up next year
Our
in general?
transportation cost, but that's primarily related to special ed. Our regular ed
Our regular is
transportation
not.
is pretty equal. I think it's actually going down
Okay.
a slight amount.
Okay. And so just as a reminder, I know we talked about it when we made some changes to transportation, it's still about $50,000 per bus per year?
The estimate from the collaborative for regular ed busing is 55,000 or so, just under 56,000 per bus for next year.
And so collecting $30,000 in revenue. I just want to point out to families, I understand that, raising the fee may be upsetting, but by no means does it cover the costs of running the transportation that we do.
Correct.
Right now, he has a projected FY17, just from our meeting in January, of $239,382
For regular ed.
for regular ed. 239,382.
Right, so quite a substantial.
The transportation fee covers about 35,000 of that, estimated.
John?
Yeah, question. Tom, those fees are paid to Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative?
No, those fees are paid directly to the Long Meadow Public Schools.
Well, no, I mean.
Oh, for the busing, transportation?
Who's
Yes.
driving the buses?
Our service provider is the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative, correct?
Now, ancillary to that, I understand East Long Meadow has its own bus system.
They do, yes.
Yet they are members of the Lower Pioneer Valley Collaborative.
Correct. A number of districts.
Maybe you're not the one to answer, but why is that? Doesn't that sound strange?
I think they've had the service for years, John, that it was provided, they own their own buses. They have a place over in East Long Meadow where they can store them, a garage for repairs. So I'm assuming they must have done an analysis that they felt that they can provide the service at a cheaper rate than what it would cost for them to receive it from an outside vendor. But they are employees of the East Long Meadow Public Schools. I believe they're part of a collective bargaining group. So, there's other challenges or, headaches that come with transportation being done in-house compared to having a vendor-provided service.
Does that in any way affect that boost that we saw, or we were looking at, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no.
Potential boost for coming year transportation costs?
No, that really is related to the special ed services we're providing for transportation right now. Looking at the number of kids and the placement of where they need to go, and in-town special ed transportation is really what's the increase for next year in our transportation costs.
Okay, thank you.
Russ?
Southwick Tolland also does their own busing too, and they're in the collaborative as well. But I think both of those schools have done that for years. I mean, I know Southwick has for 20 years maybe. So I don't think that would affect the overall cost at all.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All of those in favor? Okay.
It does say full-day kindergarten on your agenda. There is no update. We are moving forward, building the budget as the superintendent directed me to include it. So we will have that information at our next meeting, Monday night.
Were there any other questions or comments, discussion around full-day kindergarten?
Could we just describe briefly for the public what we think February 1st discussion would be on full-day kindergarten, that aspect of the discussion? I mean, I think we talked about tiers and all of that.
We're going to bring forward a budget that will show you what full-day kindergarten will cost. And then from that, because it would be above what the town has allocated. And beyond that, we'll come in with a tier 2, what a partial tuition would cost, and tier 3, what a different tuition would cost. And
Okay.
tied to each of those would be what cuts would have to be made in order to get to that tiered amount that would be budgeted.
And at that time, we could talk about whether we pay the full amount, the town pays the full amount, we try to split it with them in some way, or compromise. That discussion would happen on the 1st.
Yes.
And then in between the 1st and the 8th, presumably there'd be some more conversation, and on the 8th, we'd have our hearing.
Yes.
So, okay.
And
Thank
then-
you.
And just for clarification, the presentation of the budget, which will be the first time any of us see the budget from Tom, will be on the 1st. And then we've got that week, and then it's the budget hearing, which is when members of the public are welcome to come and voice their concerns and comments regarding the budget. I don't know that generally that night, I don't know that there's entertaining of those kind of questions because the budget wouldn't have been presented yet
February 1st?
on February 1st.
That would only leave us 2 days, though, from the 8th to the 10th. So you're thinking we'd actually discuss on the 8th?
Is that not how it's traditionally been, Tom? The budget is you present the budget to us on the 1st. That way we have the week to review and formulate our questions, which is also the time when the public can come and ask questions and voice their comments and concerns.
And I would also think that since on February 1st, it's aired on TV, the public will be watching, and if they have any concerns right away, that they would obviously email us with their questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to the superintendent, but I mean, if there's some questions we can answer that night, we most certainly will do our best to try to clear up any information that is presented. Just so we're clear, on the 1st, the select board is meeting, so they will be taping our meeting
Okay.
and playing it later. I don't know exactly when, but there's a select board meeting at 7 o'clock also next Monday, so
Okay.
they will be there to tape it, but it won't be being aired
Okay.
live.
Oh, I should-
This is historically how we have done it. We have done it that there's the public, the presentation of the budget to you, so that you can have all your questions answered and that you can formulate opinions. But then on the next meeting, the public comes in, they offer their input, and then we shut down there's a discussion after that with the school committee where you have more input and discuss the ideas that have been presented by the public.
Kim?
I don't know if it was last year or the year before, I seem to remember us scheduling 2 days so that if we didn't get through all of our discussion on the first day, we scheduled the second day to finish our discussion.
We had scheduled, the first day is you're meaning February the 8th?
Yeah,
What would
I
be
could
the
go back
equivalent
to
of-
my, yeah.
February the 8th, so that's the discussion portion, the public commentary, our further discussion.
Right.
If we are not finished discussing, or if we have more questions, want to see any more changes, then we meet again the 2 days later to vote the budget. If there's no public comment concern, there's no school committee changes historically, then we vote on the budget on the night of, this year it would be February the 8th. That the second night is scheduled should there be enormous public input or enormous concerns for members of the school committee that they want to see changes made. That gives Tom, 36 hours to change the budget, to re-present it to us for approval. But the budget has to be voted on prior to Friday, the 12th, because it must be presented to the town per their directive by February 12th. Russ?
So I have 2 questions. One is, because we have this kindergarten issue, I'd like to have discussion on the 1st about that so that we can have time to talk to the town in between. Because I think if we nail that down on the 8th, we only have 2 days to try and get to the town, give them some time to think about this. They may have some other idea that we haven't thought about with kindergarten as another piece of it. So I would hope on the 1st that we can have some conversation about that as far as what we're leaning towards at least, so that the town and us can have some type of dialogue about.
I'd suggest Janet does it sooner, that we know that we have an indication now, Tom's closer to the numbers. But what we did last year is we had a meeting with Richard Foster, Stephen Crane, Tom, Janet as the chair, and myself.
Paul Pasterzik.
And Paul Pasterzik to talk about the numbers. But I suggest we do that sooner so we have that information to bring you on the 1st. That would help you rather than debating without knowing what the information is.
Yeah, if they have a perspective on it, because I certainly want to talk to, have a discussion with them about it, because if we can compromise and go to the town meeting with a unified position on it, that would be much better in my opinion, but.
Right, and we were able to work that out last year, so it made it very easy at our 2 budget hearings because we knew where the town was and they were able to meet our needs, so that it worked out very well. So I'd suggest, Janet has talked about us doing that prior to the 1st.
Okay, I think the only issue with that would be, I'm not sure we're totally clear as a committee what we'd be willing to do to make kindergarten happen versus something else that we might have to lose.
Well, we would look at the numbers, what it would cost to do, to maintain our budget without cuts and add full-day kindergarten. So that would be the top number that we would be asking for. That would be the top budget we'd be presenting to you, the most costly. So we could start there with the discussion. Would they be willing to fund that? And if the answer is no, how much in addition could they give us above the $800,000 that they've allocated?
And so you'd come back on the 1st, hopefully with that number.
Right.
Okay.
Marie, if I could pick up on what you just said. Are we going to be able to talk about a potential override in any of your schemes, or not schemes, tiers the tiers.
I hope we'll be able to work it out with the town in a collaborative manner. It would be much better to go to town meeting as we did last year with understanding what the needs are.
But if we don't
that-
wanna, if we don't wanna cut programs, and we wanna do full all-day kindergarten, as we've been saying we'd like to, we're gonna have to ask for more revenue,
Mhm.
right? So is there gonna be a proposal in there to confront the town and say, we need more revenue, and that means an override?
Well, you'll have three choices of proposed budgets. One that is a free full-day kindergarten, one that is a partial, that's a small tuition, and one that's a little bit larger tuition. And you'll see the ramifications of each of those decisions.
Thank you.
So my second question was, on February 1st, are we going to have public comment? Or is that only the public hearing and nobody speaks on the 1st?
I don't.
It's a presentation of the budget, so we don't have public comment at that time. We'll have a regular meeting right up through Tom presents, it'll be Tom's budget hearing. I'm sorry, we'll vote on the superintendent and we'll do the budget hearing. We don't have public comment on the 1st.
Okay, so,
February 8th is designed for public comment.
so if the public wanted to give us something in advance, they should send it in via our email address
They could do that.
if we want to consider it on the 1st.
Mhm.
By Wednesday
The 27th at noon.
at noon for correspondence.
Well, for official correspondence, but we
official.
read them all up until like,
We try.
as much as we can until we come in. But
I mean, is there any reason we couldn't just do public comment? I mean, usually nobody actually comes and comments anyway, but occasionally we do.
It's never been done that way. I think the reason they don't do it is because you could get lost in public comment where a school committee has to make these decisions, and usually the board is discussing among themselves what they want to do. And then they listen to on the 8th very carefully to people.
Because this will be the first time that any of us will see it.
Yeah, I think if they have advanced questions, an email is fine, really.
Right. But that's most definitely why we scheduled the second meeting, and I know last year things got a little hairy because of the snow days and the deadline that the town requires. So when we scheduled this year, we made purposefully sure that, we had Tom present the budget to us sooner, scheduled a snow day, the public hearing, a snow day, the voting and a snow day,
Yep.
just so that we were covered on all bases, so that we could hear from the public, as opposed to running into the issue of cutting it too close to the deadline. Plus, it also, listening to committee members from last year, is we tried to squeeze it together even more, that the budget was presented to us, I want to say on a Monday, and then Thursday was the public open hearing, which didn't give committee members enough time to review the budget that was presented to them, because it is quite the large document. So, being respectful of all of those, of Tom's work, of committee members having enough time, and of hearing the public, that's kind of how it was all scheduled. Michelle?
Are there gonna be administrators on the 1st for the presentation, or in the
The
last
administrators
one?
will be here on the 1st.
On the 1st, are they coming, the 1st, we may not have our questions ready, but, having had the budget for a week, on
Mhm.
the 8th we'll have, and I hate to have them come twice.
They've been asked to come to both
They
meetings.
are coming to both, okay,
Mhm. They're important meetings, they know that.
okay.
So as soon as you know from the town, can we get an email or something so we can think about it before the 1st? I mean, you might not know until the 1st, but as soon as you know, if we could know, that way we can think about it for the 1st.
after a possible meeting with the,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do know that trying to schedule one between now and then is gonna be,
so who did you want at that meeting? Paul
it's generally the
Pasterzik?
the chairs of both select board and school committee, the finance managers of both the schools and the towns, and then the, administrator of both the schools and the town. So Tom and Paul Pasterzik, Marie and Stephen Crane, me and Richard Foster, we generally, meet. And I will certainly, send out an email and reach out to them. I do know that Richard has some travel plans, so I'm hopeful that we can schedule it before the 1st to work out with them to find out where they are. I can certainly, if that meeting occurs, I will certainly, share that information with the school committee.
As much as we can. I'm not sure they'll commit to a specific number.
Right.
But they'll what they did last time was lean toward telling us whether they could increase it or not. So that at least gave us enough of an indication that we realized that we could plan a larger budget than what was originally anticipated. I think last year they projected giving us $300,000, and we explained how come we really needed $800,000 to make it work. And once they saw that, they were very reasonable and optimistic. But I don't know that they can speak for the whole board either.
Right, right.
That's
So I can certainly provide this committee a summary report of what happens at that meeting.
Okay.
I don't mind doing that. As soon as I get an email out and hear from them as to availability, I'll just let everybody know that there is something scheduled, and that I'll update you as once it happens. Okay? All right, anything else about finance sub and budget? Okay. So policy sub, I know Michael is not here, but we did meet on Thursday evening. We're continuing our review of the policy manual. We did get through section B, as in boy. There will be some changes that will be presented at our next regularly scheduled meeting. We also reviewed and discussed the acceptable use policy, school district website policy, social media and electronic communication policies. And we're getting a few questions clarified internally from key players within the district. We reviewed and discussed the policy of admission of non-resident students. So that is, work was done. We do have another meeting set to continue our work of review. And like I said, any changes that we were recommending will be presented next regularly scheduled meeting. Since we met Thursday, there wasn't enough time to have all of that posted and added in. So that's what, yeah.
Can I
Bruce?
just mention that we're also gonna look at some of our forums that go out to parents as
Right.
part of that review.
Mhm.
So, and I know Superintendent Doyle's already working on that.
Right. All right, so, moving ahead, we have the superintendent consultant expense report and discussion. I know that Michael had been the one working on this with our legal counsel. And since he's not here this evening, he prepared a report for all of us regarding a very detailed report of the background of the contract that we signed with Ray and Associates, the issues that have been raised by the committee with any perceived breach of contract, and then what our legal counsel's advice is regarding the process. So I guess I'll just open it up to school committee for discussion. I know several members had asked if this could be put on the agenda, so I would like to open it up for discussion and review. Was that a hand
I
flying
guess
up?
I'm just thinking, do we have have they sent us a final bill? I haven't seen it in the warrants, I just thought
No, we haven't. I haven't seen. We've paid 2 invoices so far for approximately $11,300 back in November or
And
so.
that probably didn't include any of the travel expenses.
No, it was before the travel. We received one candidate's travel reimbursement that we have processed, but not a
Not the one-
candidate in question.
I'm sorry, what?
I said not a candidate in question.
Okay, that's what was gonna be my question.
And Tom, the advertising, those were separate invoices, correct? From the actual publications that we chose to advertise with?
Correct. And those were billed directly to us.
To us, and those have all been paid.
As far as I know, I don't know that we have anything outstanding. Yeah, as far as
Okay.
I know.
Because just as a reminder, the advertising was not included in the contract or the price set by Ray and Associates. It was the understanding that that would be done by the district itself, so. Russ or Michelle?
Tom, was that 11,300, that was total of the
Yeah,
two invoices?
yeah, there were
Okay.
two invoices, like $5,666 each, is my recollection.
Okay.
Russ?
Were those for the fee or their expenses?
I believe those were the fee.
Okay.
'Cause, like I said, I believe they came before, well, like I said, they were in November, so they wouldn't have incurred much of their travel and lodging expenses yet.
Okay. S-
Go ahead.
So, I think Michael and our legal counsel did a very good job preparing this memo. I think it's pretty thorough. The only, I guess, point I would make is that you might have 20 contract terms, and maybe you don't meet 2 or 3 of them, but if they're the most important 2 or 3 terms in the contract, that makes a big difference. And when I look at the areas where we had some issues, in my mind, they fall into those categories. So screening and references and the managing the candidate screening process itself. So some of those areas, I think we as a committee had some concerns. One of my main concerns is that we don't pay expenses if a person hadn't been screened well enough to determine whether they could or could not be in our pool. If we paid for that person to come out, and apparently we haven't yet, I wouldn't see that as appropriate. So that's something that, my opinion is, I think we really should push back on that, because that was their job, to screen and make sure that people were qualified for our particular position. As far as Michael's general position on this, and maybe legal counsel's as well, I tend to agree with it. I don't know if we're going to talk about publicly what they're saying.
Anything that has to be discussed regarding this must be done in open session, so.
Okay. So do you want to talk about their advice now, or?
Sure, if you would like to.
So I think,
Could I interrupt just for
Yeah.
a moment? If we begin at the end of this, it might help us understand something. They were supposed to deliver 3 candidates for the position. They did. They delivered 3 names.
I would disagree with that.
Now, I'm not a friend of the Ray and Associates.
Yes.
I have some questions about how they slipped through our process of evaluating just how strong they were. But can't they just declare, hey, you asked us to bring forth 3, we did. We gave you 3. True, one of them wasn't qualified or certified or whatever language that was equivocated on. But they delivered on time. I'm not a lawyer, but that's the fact of life, isn't it?
We were looking for 3 candidates that could take the job. And I would say we didn't get that. And so.
I would agree with you on that.
But there's also see, the thing is, their contract was not just the product. They were supposed to give us everything along the way. So, let's say in my line of work, if I gave you horrible legal advice all the way along the way, but the outcome was okay, that doesn't mean I did a good job. Now, and I'm not saying they gave us horrible advice all the way along the way, but I think there's certain areas where they definitely should have done a better job. I think there's certain things that we could show pretty clearly that happened that shouldn't have, including, one of the 3 final candidates, who, by the way, I think, looked pretty good, except that you have to have certain qualifications to work as a superintendent here. So that's not our job. We paid them to do that. If it didn't happen, then I think we should have some recourse. And I think Michael's and council's general compromise, which is to look at expenses and make sure we don't pay above the minimum fee, I think that has some rationale because it's a decent compromise. Whether the company feels that way or not, who knows? But I'm not saying that I don't believe we could get or should ask for more. I think that's a reasonable way to compromise. If we can't reach a compromise, then there's a whole different discussion I think we should have. But I would say you can't just say I met the final outcome of a contract. You have to meet all aspects of the contract. So you could have failed even if you did bring us, even if all three were licensed or could be licensed, that doesn't mean they met all of the contract.
That's not my position. I'm not defending that. I'm just saying I think that's what they're probably going to say.
Yeah, you could be right. They might. I would disagree with them, though.
The problem is how much in legal fees do we want to incur fighting them? So I think we need to kind of come up with, I don't know, a very firm decision, and I don't know where you go from there, because I don't want to spend $10,000 in legal fees fighting them.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know
I'm,
what you.
I'm sure they don't either, and that's why I think Michael came up with council with a reasonable compromise. I mean,
Which one is?
basically
17,000.
Number 2.
we pay the minimum amount, but we don't pay for the. In particular, I would say we don't pay for the expenses of anybody, any candidate that we, came to see or be interviewed here. I don't believe we should pay for expenses unless they were actually qualified. So that would be one thing. And then anything above the minimum fee, I also would have a problem with because, I don't think they met every aspect of the contract personally.
Michelle, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So yeah, I like in the following options, which was the last page, I like number 2. Any additional fees with the exception of advertising expenses be waived. Especially because I think one of the major areas that they should have been focusing on was, calling the references. We didn't have access to the candidate files until it was very late in the game. That's why we hired the firm to call the references and to vet their applications.
We know they didn't.
And just to be fair, in conversation with Ryan Ray, I was told that they do have a log of associates who have called and vetted references with dates and times. An email has been sent to Mr. Gary Ray requesting that information. And then I texted with Mr. Ryan Ray again today and asked, do they have that? That email was sent last week requesting the information, and not having a response and knowing that it would be discussed tonight, I thought I'd do due diligence and give them a chance. And he said that due to the weather in the Midwest, some of their associates could not be getting into their office or accessing their files, so they will get us the information as soon as they can. Not that I'm agreeing with them, not that I'm trying to defend them, I'm just trying to provide information that I have from them regarding the situation, because we have asked for the information, and I just want everybody to know why we don't have it yet. Whether they choose to provide it or not, I can't say, but we've at least asked.
Well, I think the information that I was going off of was that, Russ, you spoke with several of the references that said they had never spoken with anyone from Ray & Associates. So that, whether they tried, I think we should have been notified that they were unable to reach the references
Right.
if that was why they never connected. So,
Russ?
And I would, so certainly if they give us that information, we can recontact the references and see what they say, but I would say that the references were, well, let's compare what they give us, but I would be very surprised, because it wasn't just, did you contact them or not, or speak with them, it was also, did you even get any contact from them? And so the answers to that question varied, but it wasn't simply, I asked, did anybody even
Right.
reach out to you? So,
No, I
let's see what,
understand, and I
you know.
just thought it fair to let them respond to that.
Yeah.
Since I know that question was raised, which is why
And
I've tried reaching out.
Yeah,
Like I said,
and I'd
don't-
want to do that. I'd want to see, if they have a log, then let's go back to the references, because if the references, let's say, didn't provide, they forgot that somebody called them 2 months ago, maybe, that's fine. Then we should let that
Right.
go. But, we'll see if that's the case or not, I guess.
Right. No, I just thought due diligence and
Yeah.
fairness to all,
Yeah.
that's all I was.
No, it was good you raised it. I mean, I would have too, so. Not
And
that I would agree, but I.
Right, no,
I'm glad
I
you raised it.
understand. Michelle?
I also think one of the semifinalists, let's say, there was discrepancies on their application that we realized at the time, and I think, again, that should have been something that was found out before it got to the initial, the
Should've
first
been-
round was supposed to be 10 to 12 candidates. They brought us 9. Of that 9, there were issues.
With
on-
2. Yeah?
Or possibly more. I think in terms of what we charged them with, 10 to 12 candidates that they vetted, and they told us that they were, combing through their applications and calling their references and that sort of thing. I think if that had been done, I would have hoped that some of those discrepancies were caught.
And just to clarify again, and I know it sounds like I'm defending Ray and Associates, which, for all of my communications with them and frustrations, I'm most certainly not, but I just want to present a fair picture is, they were presenting us 10. One of those candidates withdrew because they accepted another position, prior to the first meeting. So they did bring forth 10, and I know this sounds like I'm trying to defend them and that I work for them, and I really don't.
I would.
Because Lord knows I was pulling my hair out with a lot of these as we went through the process, but I just want to be fair. I don't want it just to be a one-sided presentation.
I would argue that out of the 9 that they gave us, it wasn't 9, it was 8, because one of them wasn't qualified.
Absolutely.
And so that person actually made it to the final round, which was inexcusable. It should not have made it, that person should not have made it to the December 13th timeframe. And that is a failure to do their job in their contract. So I don't even know if we should pay the initial 17. I would argue that that didn't meet a certain term in their contract, and they missed it, and I would almost, we've paid you $11,300 to date. We'll pay the travel expenses for the people that came on the second meeting and the advertising expenses and call it done. Don't ask us for a reference. Sorry.
Well, and I think what we're talking about right now is simply a compromise too, because I do agree that with Kim, that at the end of the day, we were paying a lot of money for somebody else to vet the candidates, to make sure they're all qualified, to get them before us, to do it in a way where we don't have all these problems with the process. So, not that I would say that's totally in their ballpark, but a lot of it was. And I think the fact that we had that candidate that was clearly on paper, it was clear there was an issue that should have been looked into, and it didn't happen in the first round interviews, and then it came up in that round, and then they still didn't do anything before the second round. And then we were potentially paying for somebody to fly out here that they hadn't actually checked, even though they were very clear there was an issue by that point. So that for me is something where I want to be real clear that I don't want to pay for the expenses. That is
Right.
certainly not our fault that somebody came out that we couldn't hire.
They also didn't do their job. That's a part of their job they didn't do successfully, I guess, the search firm, correct?
Yep.
John?
I don't know if this is fair, but you can say it. Tell me if you don't think it is. It says here the committee split responsibility for checking NES DEC. And that's Glenn Cooker's
He's
organization.
MASC.
That's,
Glenn Kuchar is MASC.
So who is?
NESDEC,
Who is NESDEC?
New England School Development Council.
Was there some bias against having a Massachusetts or a New England firm? I mean, did anyone, was there a feeling we don't want to go with a New England firm? We want to go outside?
No. No, we just looked at their proposal packets and went through them, and each of them, some were noticeably, I'm trying to think of the word.
Generic?
Yes, generic. You know, they didn't have our name on it. It was just something that they obviously passed to everybody that they do a proposal for. And then the timelines weren't ideal as we thought.
But they-
And we called references, and, you know, some people didn't like things about certain things, so that's what we went on.
Were they the cheapest?
I don't even know. We didn't even look at that part
No, they
until the
weren't.
end.
Michelle?
Michael explained it a little bit in here, John, but there was, and maybe Tom can explain it better because this was my first round with an RFP, but there were very specific scoring matrices given to us, and we had to do it all based off of the proposals that they gave us. We received the 4 proposals, and we had to comb through their information to basically come up with scores based on their proposals. So, I can't remember where, Michael put it in here. They came in second to lowest, second to cheapest, let's say, or.
Who's that? Ray and Associates?
Ray and Associates.
Yeah, I'd have to go
But
back. I think they were
NASDAQ had
higher.
They were the
lowest
second lowest
score.
priced and the highest scoring on the technical evaluation. So basically, their proposal, which I have here, was very thorough. We all went through 4 proposals, the 4 that were given to us. Then and so everybody went through NASDAQs. Then we each split up, since there were 4, each of us took one firm to call their references. I took Ray and Associates, and I called, out of the references they gave us, and they were extensive, I called 8 different references. Only 3 called me back, but all of them were favorable.
And Michelle, I think, and Liz, I think you told me the same thing, is you all had decided on a set of questions to ask when you were checking your references. Is that correct?
We did. And,
Okay.
and actually, one of the questions was, is there anything that you wish they could have done better? And with them, every single person said, no, they did everything great. So I think in looking ahead as how could we avoid this situation in the future, I think one way we could would be to interview. You know, if we were doing this all over again next year, I would say that we should not select any firm without interviewing the person who would be coming to us from that firm, the actual consultant. If they gave us a presentation instead of just a proposal, then maybe, you know, we would have scored, I don't know, but that could be another way to fine tune our selection
Those
process.
8 references were given to you by Ray Associates?
They gave us a list of like 20, so I just,
A bell didn't go off when 5 of the 8 didn't respond?
well, this was actually in August when most people were on vacation, the schools were closed. This was just the timeline that was given to us. We had like 5 days to call and check all the references, so I think,
Okay.
you know.
And the 3 that did were positive?
They were all positive. There was nothing, and again, in that one question, is there anything that they could have done better? That's where we would have seen some red flags, and none of the people that I spoke with had anything to say in a negative way.
And I think, too, we need to, you know, not only amongst ourselves, but throughout the community, realize that back in June, it was June that you announced your intent to retire, I think, we, all of us here had acknowledged we never have hired a superintendent. We've never sat on a committee to hire a superintendent. We didn't know how to go about it, and at that point, we had all agreed unanimously that we need to hire a firm to do so. You know, experience is definitely a teacher in this, in terms of what we know now versus what we knew when we started off. You know, sure, as we went through things, you know, it would be, okay, well, this one thing was frustrating. All right, well, we didn't know any, you know, and then I, at least for myself, kind of thought, okay, well, I didn't know that I should have asked that question to start with, or I didn't know that I should have directed the discussion with the search firm in that manner. You know, I think that we did the best job that we could with the limited knowledge base that we had to start off with. You know, from June till August or September when we started this, I don't think any of us became experts in hiring a superintendent, you know, unless I'm wrong, unless one of y'all went out this summer and worked with a firm. But, you know, yes, were there frustrations along the way? Absolutely. Were they necessarily the best fit for us in terms of our expectations versus what we got? Probably not. But, you know, I just really want the community to understand we're doing the best we can with the knowledge that we come with. We're not experts in this, which is why we hired someone. You know, personally, I was expecting a little more hand-holding from the search firm in leading us on to how to run this process, and I felt disappointed that that wasn't there. But then I thought too, well, maybe that was just my expectation, and my expectation was wrong. So yes, it was frustrating. Yes, there were bumps along the way. Yes, we ultimately, you know, have a candidate whom we've offered a contract, or who we are negotiating with. So it's not that I want to, you know, place all the blame on them or all the blame on us. For us, I think it's fair to say that it was definitely a learning experience and a learning curve, and one that I hope that we don't have to go through any time in the near future to repeat the process, even though, Michelle, you said we would know a lot more now.
Well, yeah, I looked at all of this as how could we learn from this? What could we do better than next time?
Absolutely.
And I think one thing that really stands out is give more time so that you can adjust for the bumps in the road if you can, and B, do as much, you know, interviewing of the actual people as you can.
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you
Well, I
off.
just wanted to say that I think Liz and Michael and Michelle on the subcommittee level did exactly what I would have done, so I don't fault them at all. I think they did exactly what they should have. We all confirmed their decision. I think
Right.
it was the right decision at the time. And I think NESDEC sent us in their typical proposal, and we didn't have a typical RFP, so they scored the lowest. That's what happened. So would they have been a good choice? Probably. If they had given us an RFP that was more tailored to, a response to our RFP that was more tailored to it, they probably would have been selected because they were probably cheaper. But I think the subcommittee did exactly what we asked them to do. We confirmed it, and I think that's what their job was to do, and I appreciate the work on it. And by the way, the references I called for the superintendent, they don't all call me back either. So that's kind of the nature of references, unfortunately. The fact they're listed doesn't mean they want to get involved with people calling them.
And just one more thing,
Go
the
ahead.
other unfortunate thing is we never got a response from MASC, the other local
Correct.
firm, so we couldn't do anything about that, because then it's out of our control. Whoever responds to us, we have to follow the guidelines, and
Correct.
we couldn't even consider them, whereas I'm sure that we would have. And
Right. And so I think, overall, I don't disagree with you, Russ. The subcommittee did what we instructed them to do. We voted unanimously to award the contract to Ray and Associates. I think it was unfortunate that we had a shift of consultants in the middle of the process. I don't think that aided, or helped matters any, because obviously there were two very different styles of how both consultants worked. It's just a very interesting, emotional learning curve that we've all experienced.
Can I ask one? Do you think maybe that because they haven't sent us any bills, they kind of feel that they have not done their job, like they feel like they shouldn't get paid?
Or they're waiting to watch one of our meetings to find out what they should
They
bill
know,
us
they
for?
know we're talking about it tonight.
Payment upon the superintendent.
Oh, do they wait for the signing of a contract?
I'd have to look at in terms of the contract, to see exactly if there were milestones in terms of their payments. I don't
remember that.
know, I don't either, but I don't know, Liz, that they're not billing us. I think they would bill us and then have that conversation at some point.
Okay. Just hopeful thinking.
Russ?
So I'd like to make a motion that we pay the minimum $17,000 fee minus what we've already paid. That we wouldn't pay any additional fees to Ray and Associates we would still pay the advertising fees, because that's part of our contract. And we also would not pay for any candidates that, the expenses for any candidates that came out that were not licensed to take the job, or could not be licensed to take the job.
Or whose
I'll second
applications,
that.
could you amend that to say, or whose applications were not completed accurately?
I think we could just say that one applicant. There's only one applicant this falls under, isn't it?
Well, I would say that maybe one other application wasn't completed accurately or wasn't presented to us accurately.
Oh. Okay, so we'll leave it the way I had it generally then.
So, I don't, could we say number 2, Michael's compromise in here, accept and ask that any additional fees with the expect?
You might have already reimbursed the second candidate you're thinking of, if I know who you're thinking of. I don't know all the circumstances, but.
Figure it out.
All right, so your motion was, I'm sorry,
So it's, I guess it's that number 2, which is accept the minimum fee of $17,000 and require that any additional fees, with the exception of advertising expenses, be waived. And I guess we have to add to that, and we will not pay the expenses of,
Should we say the person's name?
I guess, the 2 candidates that were not eligible to take our position.
I think it would, if it's a
So,
moot point, then,
basically, we found out some information about one of the candidates kind of as we were sitting there on, if I'm remembering right.
The
December
second date?
12th?
The 12th. Yeah, I guess we really dug into it on the 12th, but it didn't make that candidate not
right,
viable.
right, they were certifiable,
yeah.
exactly, I just.
So that terminology wouldn't work there. We just felt like, the application was misleading. And then the information that we didn't get, it was like omitted from, important information was omitted from that discussion. And we just covered it ourselves, right?
What if we just read the language on number 2?
And I think we already paid that though.
Well,
Because
it's
then
not,
it doesn't say that we're gonna pay anything.
So this is any additional fees, excuse me, with the exception of advertising expenses be waived, so all the travel expenses, they would waive, they would eat those costs?
yeah, those aren't really additional fees, though, they're
Oh, okay.
candidate expenses. So we could just say we don't want to pay the candidate expenses.
but that would also include Ray and Associates travel
Yeah.
expenses.
Well-
Because we've not gotten billed for those either.
So
The
excluding.
consultant travel expenses.
So, should we second and then have discuss?
Well, okay, so I think my motion is just going to be what I read, and the one candidate that we know for sure had an issue that couldn't be resolved. We won't pay
Exclude.
that person's expenses.
And that's what I'm seconding.
Okay. So, further discussion, Kim?
So, above the 17,000, besides advertising, what other expenses might we be incurring? Ray and Associates travel?
And any other candidate?
And
There would only
candidate?
be only one other candidate travel expenses
So
for
the,
December 12th, correct, Tom?
Well, somebody puts in for mileage, but haven't heard.
Yeah, I mean, I
That-
assume they will, or any of the local people. So you wanna pay the minimum $17,000 fee?
I don't want to, but I would do that as a compromise.
the,
I guess.
the base fee was 17, and then in their proposal, their estimated expenses were 5,400.
So, well, that's what I'm questioning, because I feel like it was gonna go up to 25,000 with what fees?
Advertising
Okay, which is additional, which we're paying.
and travel.
There's shipping,
Which we're
copies,
paying.
postage, faxing. Those are the other ones.
So this is kind of what we would have paid anyway, in my mind. Am I reading that incorrectly? If,
We would have paid for the candidates who needed to be flown in, potentially twice, and we would have paid for travel by the Ray and Associates consultants. So Ryan flew in from.
But we're going to pay that, so we're gonna pay the associate's travel fee. We're gonna pay the candidate's travel fee minus one person. We're gonna pay the advertising expenses. And a lot of those would have, is that what the assumption was, that the 25,000 would have included? Around? So, to me, we're not getting anything. We're not asking for any discount here.
We're getting one person's travel.
We're getting one person's travel, and I feel like it should be
So-
less than that.
And I agree with Kim. I think that's why I liked the way I interpreted the language. So I'm not saying that it was the way I should have, but I read it to say that we're just gonna pay $17,000, which is their minimum fee, plus the advertising expenses. And ask that all other fees or expenses be waived due to the situations that we encountered.
Can I
That's
just
why I wanted
ask something here? Isn't this just our first, this is our first proposal? They're gonna respond to it, right?
Well, yeah,
So
but,
we could just say, we'll give you $17,000, period.
I mean, I
And
honestly.
then let them say, wait a minute, and let them make the case, instead of us sitting here making the case.
I think that's what number 2 really is 17 grand, and we're not, and what I'm adding is, and we're not going to pay for that candidate's expenses. I mean, that's the way I understand this.
But we're still gonna
No.
end up, but that's kind of what we were paying anyway.
But
Well, I
if
don't think
could,
we
though,
should pay-
isn't this negotiation? They're gonna come back.
Yeah.
So we can come back.
Where is the, here it is.
Okay, so,
So, we were going to pay a flat fee of $17,000 with additional extra billable expenses for actual expenses incurred, which is, not exceeding $25,900, which is inclusive of the 17 that the school committee must authorize payments in excess of. So that difference between 17,000 and 25,900 was gonna be advertising fees, candidates' travel,
Consultant
Ray and
travel.
Associate travel, et cetera, correct?
Yeah. So I think what we're saying with this motion is, we're only gonna pay 17 grand, period. Plus the advertising, which we have to pay anyway.
Okay.
And that's separate.
That's separate.
We already
We
paid that.
separately.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so it's really 17 grand to Ray and Associates. We pay for the candidate's expenses, except for that one. But we don't pay for Ray and Associates expenses, we don't pay for them flying out here or driving out here,
I
whatever they
think
did.
we need to be clear about that then with them. Because that's, I would see that as
I
an
see
okay
how you're
solution.
interpreting it.
'Cause I'm
Which is how I
interpreting-
interpreted it.
Yeah, because
But we already picked the one of the candidates to come, right? We already did that.
I'm only talking about the one. I think the rest of them came out, they were qualified, it's, you know.
as long as there's some sort of discount that I see here, because I feel like there should be some sort of,
It really comes down to, we're gonna pay the 17, not the 25. I mean, that's another way to look at it, because you know they're gonna bill basically up to the 25.
well,
So,
right.
I mean, I don't care if you wanna do more, but I think at a minimum, we should get that. I mean, that's a compromise in my mind.
So we're gonna tell them that we're not gonna pay them for their Ray and Associates travel fees and all that.
They're gonna get a total check of 17, we already paid 11 something, so that's the way I look at it.
And candidate expenses less the one.
Or should we wait and see if they send us a bill before we even volunteer to pay this?
Well,
This is, I think, what we're authorizing, I'm sorry.
I would think that, I would just, if it was me personally doing business for myself at home, I would be like, well, if I don't get a bill, I'm not paying you. So I think this discussion is for when we're presented with a final bill. Now, perhaps the committee is thinking differently, and I'd like to hear that. And Michelle, you were gonna.
No, I was just gonna say, I think this is what we're authorizing Tom to pay when he gets a bill. We're not saying send out the bill now, send out the payment, but when you receive a bill, is
Yeah.
that what your motion was for Russ?
I think that would be the first step, would be to have Tom do it. If Tom can't get resolution, then unfortunately we start down the attorney road, and so would they, which I want to avoid, because that's gonna cost a fair amount of money for both parties. I think we're better off to come up with what I think is a reasonable way out of this, and then move forward.
I mean, we can, in Michael's proposal, it also said that our legal counsel can send a letter on our behalf if we wish, outlining what we'd like to do. So I don't know if that's something that you would like done now or once the bill is received. Once the bill is received?
I would say that because we have to pay to have the lawyer put together the letter,
Right.
so right now, let's wait till we get the bill.
Right.
And then this is how we.
And then let our legal counsel draw up that letter, which then can be submitted with the payment up to $17,000.
If needed, or maybe Tom can have that conversation.
Or maybe we just, maybe we just leave it as we've talked about this. We all know where we are right now.
And wait until
When we
a bill
get the
comes in.
bill, have another hopefully
Discussion.
brief discussion. We've all, I don't know.
Okay.
What do you guys think?
I mean, I'm not for
Do we-
paying anybody before we have to, so.
We
I'm
also
not
don't want
guessing
it to
Tom
drag
is
out
either.
to July also, because we want to.
We won't pay a bill unless we have an invoice to pay off. So we're not gonna preemptively send out a payment for something they have an invoice that's for.
I mean, another option is you as chair could call them and tell them this is our position on your services. If this is acceptable, then we don't need to get our attorneys involved, and you don't.
Right. I mean, I could certainly
Yes.
do that once we receive the bill, rather than, again, preemptively if they don't send out a final bill.
Oh, they will.
Oh,
Well-
I'm sure they will.
I'm sure we'll get one.
You know, and I'm
Probably
more
right
than
after this
happy,
meeting.
you know, to either, you know, draft a letter or to have that discussion. Just knowing from the experiences that I have had with them throughout the whole process, I think putting it in writing, is a much better option than discussing it with them by phone.
Yeah, I think only the discussion would happen. We obviously need a written agreement that says this is what we all agreed to do. I mean, we can't leave this.
Well, but even to have the discussion, I think, I would feel more comfortable, having it in writing, because I know that throughout this process, there were several items that were taken care of via phone conversations that then, when questioned about later, there was no documentation, and so there was argument could be made either side. Well, it was never put in writing. So
Mhm.
just to make sure we're covering ourselves completely, I would feel more comfortable, with an initial discussion of being in writing, of just saying, once we get a final bill, is to say, this is what the committee has discussed, this is what we're authorizing, and certainly that could be approved by this committee before it gets sent out.
Yeah, I'd be
That's
comfortable with that.
acceptable.
Mhm.
You guys
Yep.
comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we will just, was there anything else that anybody wanted to discuss about Ray and Associates?
Do you need to table
We have a
his motion?
Yeah, do you want to table your motion or withdraw your
Well, I
motion?
think the motion stays the same. We should vote it, and then you have authorization when it
Okay.
comes in.
So the motion is to pay up to $17,000 and candidate travel expenses less the one candidate, with no Ray and Associate travel expenses or any additional expenses submitted. Is that correct for the
Yes.
motion? And John, you had seconded that?
Correct.
All right, so then can we take a vote for all those in favor of that motion? Okay.
I'd still like to see the invoice before we pay it, and I know I will.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Well, absolutely, and Lord knows that Tom will not let us pay anything without an invoice until they send it, so. Which is good. We like that, Tom. All right, so we do have a preliminary field trip approval. Could I have a motion?
I move on the recommendation of the superintendent that the school committee approve the preliminary request to secure prices and make arrangements for students from Long Meadow High School to travel to England and Belgium in February 2017.
Is there a second?
Second.
Nice trip.
All right, all those in favor? Again, my services are available for chaperoning. No one is taking me up on these overseas field trips, but I'll keep trying. All right, so we now have the school calendars for 2016-17 and 2017-2018. We had approved the 2016-17 school calendar on October 26th. However, there is been a proposed change to the middle school conferences. In the past, only grade 6 has had 2 days in the fall and 2 days in the spring as half-days scheduled for parent-teacher conferences. And the middle school principals would like to have 7th and 8th grade follow the same schedule to allow for the ease of scheduling said parent-teacher conferences. So this is presented to us this evening for our approval. And my understanding is, so that means that in, where is it, October 27th, 28th, and then
February 9th and 10th.
February 9th and 10th, those would be half-days for students in grades 6, 7, and 8, rather than just students in grade 6 on the first day and all students the second day. Is that correct? Okay.
Should it be?
Good question. Is this something the LEA has signed off on with the calendar committee?
Yes,
Because we had a problem with it. Has it?
yes.
Fine.
All right.
We had a problem several years ago.
No, no
All
problem.
right, so could I have a motion for this one, please? Oh, Michelle?
Move on the recommendation of the superintendent and the school committee, sorry.
Calendar.
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 Committee.
Oh, thank you. I move on the recommendation of the superintendent and the calendar committee that the school committee approve the 2016 and 2017 school calendar as amended and presented.
A second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion about those changes requested? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Oh, sorry, John.
No.
Oh, you were ready to vote. All those in favor? Okay. All right,
I have a question before we do 2017. Why are we doing 2017-18? Isn't that the prerogative of the next committee?
We're doing that so that we can reserve Symphony Hall for graduation. Schools are booking 2 years out, so the high school asked we come up with a calendar 2 years in advance so that they could book Symphony Hall.
We did it last year, we kind of preliminary approved the graduation date.
right, the
Mhm.
start date and the end date.
Right.
And now we're getting the in-between dates.
Okay.
Okay? So, as John has alluded, we have been presented a draft for the 2017-18 school year calendar. Can I have a motion so then we can discuss, Michelle?
I move on the recommendation of the superintendent and the calendar committee that the school committee approve the 2017 and 2018 school calendar as presented.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Russ?
So, John, are you saying that you'd like it to essentially be subject to the approval of Marty O'Shea as the incoming superintendent, or his review or something like that? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I was just wondering if a future committee, it might change, would have different
Different
ideas,
opinions?
that's all.
So maybe the committee and the superintendent?
They'd have the right to revise
I
it
mean,
as you
they-
did tonight.
Yeah, they could.
Okay.
Can I, are we in discussion?
We're in discussion.
So, I mean, I know there's like a unspoken rule about that day in December that's a half day. But like,
There's no unspoken rule.
I just feel like there is because I questioned it with the last calendar and now I see here we have the full week is December 18th to the 22nd. The 22nd is a half day. Saturday is the 23rd, which is a whole day off. Sunday is the 24th, which is Christmas Eve. And then Christmas is the Monday, which we have that whole week off. I'm just questioning the half day on the 22nd because we didn't do it this year and we didn't do it for a reason.
And the reason I believe, I'm sorry, Michelle.
You
Did
can
you
go.
want to address it?
You can go.
The reason I believe we rescinded that day from this year's calendar was because last year we were running so tight with the number of hours with the early release days, with the snow days and delayed starts, that was a concern for this year, which is why it got removed from just this past December's calendar. Now, next year, it is a half day. Now, what is the, and maybe this is what you were gonna address, is next year's calendar says half day all, and 2017-18 just says half-day.
I assume it's for all. They probably
Yeah.
just messed it.
Yes, I just think that language is not in there, but the calendar committee voted to have the day before, basically the Friday of break be a half-day. So
Is there a reason? Like,
there were several reasons for it, one being that, oftentimes kids will be dismissed early. I think it's tough for instructional time for the teachers. They felt strongly enough to make a vote about it. And they,
it's just 2 days before the holiday. That were 3 days, well, if you include Christmas Eve, I mean, I'm just like,
well, in terms of hours on learning, having the half-day there doesn't change. If we were in an emergency situation because we had so many snow days that we may end up having to make up the hours, what was discussed was that then they could look at other possibilities.
I just look at, that to me looks like a lost day, because when they're there for 3.5 hours or a half day, I don't know how much work gets done.
Well, I think the same would go for a full day, so then it's just, again, in terms of the days that they're there.
I don't know, my kids had tests that day. They had stuff going on that day. They were definitely working. I would question that, but I feel like it's a waste to have a half day there, but
I think,
I know I'm in the minority, so I will keep my.
No, I don't
You
necessarily.
Well, I know,
Well, I think we heard from the students that were disappointed about having the full day there. We've heard from the teachers, the calendar committee voted to keep this as a half-day. I think the way that, the calendar has been made up, it's been made up of the calendar committee with administrators and teachers and representatives that were chosen to create the calendar based on, I don't know the history of how this.
To have input so that they could have a voice and recommendation to school committee. I think they also felt that it's the day before break and therefore there are parties and celebrations and that the kids are winding down regardless of whether it was the 22nd or 23rd, that it's a wind down day.
Are there parents on the calendar committee?
No, just, we added Michelle and Michael as school committee reps. But that might be a good idea to add some parents, but this was done before my time. I don't know what the reason was that there was a calendar committee set up.
I know a parent had asked me last year how she would give her input because she wasn't fond of some things that she saw on it and wasn't feeling that it was very friendly to some working parents with, but I know that we did make some effort. I noticed.
There were a lot of changes
yes.
that were worked on for the
all the
16-17 calendar.
Right, but I thought that somehow there was a parent on the committee. But okay.
Michelle's a parent.
Well, I know.
Well,
you're also a school committee member.
Yeah, I try not to. When I'm asked questions as a parent, I'll offer my input. I try to, keep the parent side of it out if I'm not trying to, if I'm not being asked. But I think these are open meetings, so correct? Are they not open?
They're not.
They're not, it's my committee.
So I don't know if it would be helpful for people to observe how the decisions are made, but there's a lot of, discussion, and they have reasons behind the choices that are on here that I didn't understand until I served on the committee, and I think it was helpful to see how they arrived at these decisions. So I don't know, if people were able to go to observe how the decisions are made, that might help.
Kim, people do contact the superintendent, they do contact members of the school committee. We did make significant changes to this calendar based on parent input. So I think that they are heard. I think they have come to meetings, and they certainly met with me to let me know their feelings about the calendar, and I communicate that, I think, pretty well to the LEA and try and represent the parental viewpoint as well.
Okay. I'm just questioning the half day.
I'm with you. But I'm the Grinch, so. All right, so there's a motion, and it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Okay. So this is also the time where we have Marie's mid-year review. where we get an update on her report on her goals to date thus far. So I'm going to turn it over to Marie. You have your computer, okay.
In September, we went through what the DESE gives us as a template for developing what our goals are for the year. It involves 3 key areas. The first of those areas was professional practice. Under professional practice, my first goal A was to implement after-school planning time at the elementary schools. As you know, part of the LEA negotiations last year was that the elementary school teachers would have planning time after school on Monday and Wednesdays. On Monday, it would be principal directed, and on Wednesdays, it would be teacher directed. So the part of the pieces of attaining that goal were to meet with the principals, review plans and discuss agendas, align with district goals, and report back to you what they've been talking about. So if you take a look at the bottom piece of this presentation on this page, the bottom page, you'll see these are all the topics they've discussed. I'm very impressed with the range and the amount of information that they've covered. I feel like these meetings are very beneficial because they're doing everything from the new math curriculum down to what student concerns are. They've looked at writing, literacy, social, emotional curriculum, special education. They've been able to look at RTI, team goals for evaluation, specialized program, sharing of lessons, best practices, project planning, and more. Any questions on the after-school meetings? My second goal is around student learning. In student learning, goal A was to increase student achievement. So the after-school meetings were successfully held at the elementary schools. Elementary work was done in math, including staff development and development of new units. AIMSweb has been administered in the fall. It will be done again the end of January, so we don't have that data for you just yet. Susan will be reporting later once principals are able to look at their AIMSweb data from late January and put together a report. Last year's data was used for fall student planning. Fall testing was used for student placement for targeted instruction. Administrative discussions were held on testing and student achievement. AIMSweb first week in February. Reports will be submitted by the principals after this analysis. The WIN block, this is our second year, has been again successfully implemented. The WIN block is what I need. This is where special education students are clustered. We have ELL students that meet. We have students that just need intervention. It's targeted in 6-week intervals, and this has been put into all 3 elementary schools successfully. June reports will indicate the success of testing, curriculum alignment, and the WIN block because we'll be able to look at the AIMS data to see whether or not there's been improvement. Also, we have elementary science and social study reviews that are underway currently. Goal B was to look at homework guidelines, and they were developed last year. We had a lot of input from the staff, from parents. School committee got to peruse those guidelines as well. The draft was reviewed in August with the administrative team. A final copy was shared with the school committee in September. We also then sent out the final copy to parents and staff in September to begin utilizing the new homework guidelines. It was put into practice. I solicited feedback from the administrative team in January. I've received positive feedback from the administrative team, and I've only heard from one parent, which is indicative that this has been well received. Goal C, bring your own device at the middle schools. We developed the student user agreement. We developed a question and answer sheet, as well as a video for parental review. I met with the middle school principal several times, Nicole Allen and Taylor Rye, and we worked on these documents together. The principal then met with teams of teachers in the fall to plan a rollout for January. The communication plan was put into effect so that parents would know about this, staff knew it was happening. And we put in a security plan for locking lockers because the middle schools have had an open concept where we haven't had locks on them. And with the people bringing in devices, we felt it was important that students were given locks and be able to put it in a secure place. Any of the documents that I mentioned on this page, you may find on the middle school websites. My third area is district improvement. Again, this comes from the DESE. Goal A was to explore an elementary health curriculum. I established a health committee. We reviewed what was happening in other districts. We sent out a survey to parents and teachers. And the recommendation of the committee is that we place grade 5 health in the FY17 budget and grade 4 health in the FY18 budget. We looked at where we could possibly schedule it because on the survey, feedback from the teachers showed great concern about not having time to put it into the curriculum. They did not want to lose class time. So we looked at a possible schedule where we could use one section of the WIN block once a week and rotate through. They'd have a third of the year where they'd study health one time a week. If this position were to be funded, then summer curriculum work would be done to align the curriculum. When we add grade 5 curriculum, that could impact what's done in 6, 7, and 8, and the same thing when we add grade 4, that would impact what's done in grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it's going to be important to continually massage the curriculum as more is added at the younger grades. Goal B is to implement the new technology curriculum. It was reviewed and implemented in September. I have a meeting on February 2nd with the technology teachers to review the success from their vantage point and to find out how the new curriculum is going. We have visited technology classrooms where we see students making newscasts as well as working on a lot of the new curriculum that was written. It looks very impressive as the standards have been raised across the board for our students. Goal C is to update the technology plan. The Director of Technology is forming a committee. I believe it's going to meet on February 5th to update our 3-year technology plan. Nicholas George will present it to the school committee in March, and he will report on our progress at that time. Goal D is to increase communication. A district newsletter was sent out in October, and actually the second newsletter went out today. We were ahead of schedule. The Special Programs Committee has met monthly. We hosted 3 parent speakers. Lynn Lyons is coming next week, is it? In developing a plan to host 3 more speakers next year. The middle schools will also be hosting Explore Days for students to learn more about different career paths. Do you have questions?
So we're waking you up again.
Kim?
I have a question on the implementation of the new technology curriculum. Does that mean that each of the elementary schools are now have the same curriculum, and so grade 5 in every school is going to have the same experience?
All the elementary schools are exactly the same, and the middle schools are now exactly the same.
So they have the same scope and sequence that might be taught in a little bit different way. They still have autonomy in teaching the stuff, but the skills
So
are the same.
they'll be learning the same skills. So
skills.
every 5th grader or 4th grade, whatever, 5th grader
Yes.
that goes into middle school, no matter what school you went to, is going to know the same
Should
thing.
be there with the skills that they're expected to do.
Okay. Because that was one area I know wasn't happening
Yeah, we're
last
very
year.
excited about that. We've added the green screen to all the schools. You see newscasts being written, so a lot of projects that were happening at one school are now in all the schools.
I know. And with the bring your own device at the middle schools, what type of devices are we seeing that the kids are bringing in?
I don't know just yet. I'll have to ask. I know that Taylor had them hold off on the cell phones right away, but they will be allowed to bring them because if some students have them in the device the parents want them to use, that's okay. But I'm not sure. We did recommend the Chromebook, but I can ask and bring you back that information.
I was just curious about, because I know the backpacks get really heavy at that point, because isn't there an extra binder that gets added in middle school? So then if we put if they're now carrying around a laptop, I mean, you have a middle schooler, I don't know if they're, are they carrying around literally 2 binders and a laptop all day?
No, he doesn't have a laptop. He's in 6th grade, so he doesn't have the laptop.
Oh, so they don't do that
And,
yet, 6th grade?
Only if they want to bring their laptop in.
Right, it's
Yeah,
voluntary.
yeah, even my son doesn't even want to bring his phone in. So, because we have the technology there to use, so
Is there,
he
yeah, I
feels,
was
he feels no
wondering.
need to bring his own in.
I had a parent ask me about which device she the Chromebook and if kids were actually really storing them in their lockers. Because it seems like something that you wouldn't want to keep in your locker.
Well, now that they're locked, they were never locked prior to this year, so. But in the long run, BYOD is going to be important because as we expand our technology use, we're not going to be able to financially keep supporting having technology in every classroom. And we've reached a great point in technology use where we have more demand than we have units to put into classrooms. So BYOD is a way that if we can do that at the upper grades, it means we can free equipment for the lower grades and still make sure we're using it effectively and make sure it's available for all of our teachers to use.
No, I know that they've been using them, other schools have been using them for a while, so it's
Yep.
good for us to start as well. With the homework guidelines, is there some sort of parent survey that's gonna go out to make sure that the homework guidelines are being followed?
I wasn't planning on that because I am sure that I would hear from the teachers and the principals if we were having problems. The fact that I spoke with the principals and they're finding that there's satisfaction with the teachers and parents, we vetted this homework procedures for a full year and had an awful lot of feedback from teachers and went back to faculty meetings, I don't know how many times, because there was a lot of discord originally when it was planned. So I think we're at a good place with it, and the fact that we've received, very little feedback from parents in terms of negativity about it has been positive.
I'm just thinking about I know that we've got certain timeframes that we've suggested for certain grades. I'm just wondering if, I guess, all of those timelines are actually being followed.
I would have to
Teachers.
ask the principals that. I know that that's been discussed with the faculty. We did say it was extremely important that they're using the timelines because they were built in a hierarchy so that each year it's an incremental increase in homework so that students are, building up the stamina to do longer homework by the time they get to the high school. And we did look at our high school expectations because you do have to look and say, okay, a 9th grader is expected to do 2 hours of homework. You can't have an 8th grader only doing an hour's homework because it's not preparing them for the high school.
You mind if I piggyback on that for a second?
Yeah, no.
I have another question about this, hook onto that one. In regard to homework, that is probably the most common complaint I get, actually, this year. So I've gotten a whole bunch of feedback. I'm actually surprised they haven't sent anything in directly.
I'm surprised too.
But I've heard quite a bit, and I don't know every parent, so it could be just a small subset of parents, but I've heard quite a bit of.
That's why I was asking for the parents,
Yeah,
about a parent survey.
So I hear a couple things. One is some feel that they're just getting way too much homework, and then other parents are saying their kids don't get any homework and they can't figure out why there's a difference. That's not a very scientific, comment to make right now, but that is what I've kind of heard is that.
And I think just to interrupt
I've had a lot of
you-
people ask me what to do about it, and I said just send something to the committee or send it to the superintendent. Apparently that hasn't happened, but I have heard a lot of concern actually about it.
Well, there's always been the concern of there's such variance in the homework assignments, even at a certain grade level or school to school. And we have had complaints where they go to grade 5 and they have a lot less homework than they had in grade 4. So this was an attempt to level the playing field and let people know, because teachers disagreed philosophically. You had one 4th grade teacher that thought, an hour of homework was plenty, another thought 15 minutes was. So this was an attempt to do that. I think it will still be imperfect in its year because some teachers still are not adhering exactly as it is, but my recommendation would be to contact the principal to start with and then contact me if it's not satisfied at that level.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a conversation the principal has to have with the team of teachers. That we did this homework procedures, we had everyone's input, we're building up, we're a district, we're a system. You can't work in isolation on what you think the homework time should be spent by your children.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard I think as a parent, it's hard to figure out where to go about this because you really don't want to complain typically directly to the teacher and say, well, you're not giving my kid enough homework or you're giving too much, and it's kind of a tough conversation, although you have to have it at some point. And I think most teachers are doing exactly what the guidelines say. I think what happens is if anybody's not then everybody starts talking about that, and it becomes an issue. So I think we got to figure out a way to measure how well the guidelines are really working. And that's was going to be my general comment actually about the evaluation, is I think in the future, we have to be really clear about what we're measuring and then how do we measure it. And so I think, I made this comment early on when we did this evaluation in the first place, but it's kind of hard for me to measure some of these things. I know you changed some of the language to try and address the concern, and I think in the future we'll try to hopefully do that again as a committee for the next evaluation. But I think we need to figure out a way to measure how well is that homework guideline working. I'm not sure what it would be, if it's a survey but somehow we have to measure it, because I don't think individual parents are going to be able to by themselves correct any problems that might exist. I think we have to figure out how do we know whether it's actually working or not, is really the question.
And I think, hearing, both of you and the feedback, granted mine are older, but it's the inconsistency of the follow-through with the policies. Yes, we have the policy, yes, the principals have, and the teachers have all worked on it and have agreed to it, but that still doesn't mean that, in whatever grade, teacher A still doesn't, give more homework than teacher B in that grade, even within the same building, much less between buildings. And I know that's the goal, is that we get more consistent. Now, will it be the exact assignment down to the exact minute? Absolutely not, because we do want the teachers to teach the best way that they feel and do the projects they feel best. But I think that there are some big swings and big discrepancies within buildings between grade levels, and then also, within buildings within grade levels and between buildings within grade levels. So I don't know how, like you said, I don't know how to measure that accurately, and I don't know that parents necessarily feel comfortable, even though they should with all of our principals, to be able to talk with them. I think there's still fear of being viewed as a complainer, or being viewed as retaliative, or whatever the personal reason may be. Parents may not be comfortable bringing those to the attention of the principal.
I think parents have to be comfortable doing that, because there's,
I'll give that, because I get text messages. I mean, I drive carpool with kids from every elementary school, all the same, and I can tell you, just when we went over the homework guidelines, I just kind of took it, looked at it, and went, oh, we'll see. And as I go along the last 6 months, I can tell you there are some fifth graders doing 2 hours of homework every night, and there are some fifth graders doing 40 minutes of homework every night. And it varies at the school, individual school. It varies among all 3 schools. No matter which fifth grader I have in my car, one of them's telling me they're doing homework an hour and a half every night, and the guideline is 50 minutes of homework and a half an hour of reading, or 25 minutes, whatever it is, of reading. And when I drive around with these fifth graders in my car, and I hear a kid at center school is doing what he's doing, and I hear another kid at Wolf Swamp is doing what they're doing, and then I hear about the 3 kids that I have in my car from Blueberry in 3 different classes, and they're doing 3 different things, that's what I'm still questioning what's going on.
Right. You also have to consider every child's different. Like, my daughter can read a whole book in an hour. Maybe one child cannot read a paragraph in 2 days. So those are a lot of differences. Some kids are perfectionists. Some race through their homework. There's it's very subjective.
Right, and that's what's hard, and, in terms of measuring, that's what's so hard is because it is that subjective nature. I know, when my boys were in elementary school and in middle school, I kept asking, I'm like, okay, well, could you give them homework? Oh, well, the average homework we give is for an average student. And I'm like, okay, well, mine are done in 10 minutes, and I really could use some more. And, having a teacher say it versus mom say it, and, but I get, they have to give what is for the average child, but that's hard.
Right, and what I would rather see, though, is that something like projects are given enough time, or even, I'm not a fan of projects to do with other kids outside of school, and especially like over vacation. I think that's something we can more control than minutes on homework, because
Well,
that has been done.
Well, that I know, I heard as well, happened over the holiday. There was a homework, not an elementary level, but another level. There was a project given to multiple kids over a holiday break when kids are not in town.
Yeah, and that's not
I'm
fair.
questioning how we're making sure the guidelines are being followed, because that's in our
Again,
policy
people
manual.
have to come forward to the principals, because we're going to give a survey and you're going to get all these complaints
Right.
to me. It will do no good. It has to go to the principal, and if it's not resolved at that level, then it comes to me with a face-to-face conversation or email.
Yeah, because it is so subjective. You know, while we would like to make sure items for evaluation are quantitative and we can measure, this is one that you really can't, because like Liz said, you know, her daughter will read a book in an hour, and you know, there's another student who will take an hour to read the 2 pages.
Yeah.
But this should be close enough that you're not hearing such diversity in dialogues in a car. And that's where the principal's helpful, because if a student does take longer, they're a perfectionist, the principal can come back to the parent and say, well, here's why your child's spending so much longer, because you frequently hear so-and-so's taking 3 hours in 3rd grade to do their homework. But they can delve into it too, or they can find out, oh, the teacher's really not giving a lot of homework. Hey, we now have the guidelines and the procedures, you should be doing this much time. So.
Michelle?
Could we try to create with just like a 5-question survey that says, you know, my child is in 2nd grade, they, you know, and then please choose how much homework they get, 15 to 20 minutes, 30 to 45 or whatever, and then like one of the questions being, you know, I feel that the homework is appropriate for my child's age or learning level, just to see how parents are feeling overall about the amount of work that they're, and then with that, not to pinpoint anything, we could just use it to figure out what percentage of the parents are feeling that their children are overwhelmed or underwhelmed, or, you know, just to get some feedback that doesn't require parents to go forward to principals. And it's not in a complaining manner at all, it's just more of let's get some feedback from the parents and see how they're feeling about the homework, the new homework policy, because that is.
You could start it with, you know, we've implemented a new homework policy this year. How do we think it's going?
Right, and I think the other thing I wanted to highlight that we should maybe bring up, and that would be a great time, is that you have that language in the homework policy that says, and I think parents should be reminded of it, is if your child is working harder than you think and they're struggling, then to please let the teacher know, because I don't think the point of this was for children to be doing in 2nd grade 2 hours of homework because they can't complete it. They should stop when they're at that frustrated level. And so maybe with that survey, we could also remind parents that to talk to the teacher, because, you know, or to stop if they've been doing homework for too long. Yeah, because that was, you know, one of the main points of the homework guidelines was use your judgment, I think.
Well, I can certainly put together a survey, but my fear also is that the parents who have the most problems will fill out the survey and the others won't. But we'll see what happens. We can look at it and see what the feedback is.
Anything else from Maureen?
I mean, I think I said this in a prior meeting, but it's really good to have variance. I wouldn't want all teachers to do the exact same amount of homework. And there's studies that say that a lot of homework actually does you no good at all. It could be detrimental, really. And some teachers might be great in the classroom and not need to give kids much homework at all. And the scores are still great and everything else. So, it's hard to, I guess the stories I hear where kids are, crying, like a good student that's upset because it's so much homework and they can't get it done. That's when I get a little worried, because it's not the kid that's ever had that problem before or doesn't have it in other classes. And so, but that's really, as you said, it's kind of a principal issue. You have to go to the principal and say, listen, my kid's normally this way, and this year it's this other way.
It took an awful lot of work to get consensus around how much time should be at each grade level, and it went back and forth. There was an awful lot of discussion, so it's now going to be working that out. It won't be perfect. It will never be perfect, because you really can't guess how much 50 minutes of homework is in an hour. But
And I would hate to see, and I'm not saying that surveying the parents isn't a good idea, but I would hate for it to be done with the thought that, well, your input is gonna change, or make drastic changes to the policy as it is because of the amount of time and effort. I know it took over a year to get consensus between, administration and faculty and all of that. So I don't want it to be viewed as well, sure, we can have our input and now they're gonna make all these changes, and then when changes aren't made, now we're gonna be frustrated because they asked for our opinion and they didn't do anything with it. So I don't know how to do that.
Well, I know it will be Marty's problem, so it's okay.
Not fair.
Yeah.
Not fair, but do you see what I'm
I
saying?
agree. I don't think you should make massive changes to this. This was a lot of work and a lot of back and forth with the staff. We had to get all the schools to agree, the 3 elementary, the 2 middle school.
Right.
There was an
And at the
awful lot
same
of staff
time, I
input.
don't want parents to feel like we're asking for your opinion and now, well, great, we got it, but that doesn't mean we're changing anything.
No.
I think it really comes down to if you have a teacher that's giving no homework, which I also hear some of that too, or a ton of homework. It might just be that that teacher has never really, you're not doing the homework yourself, so maybe you just don't have an idea of how much time it really
Well, and
takes to complete it.
maybe
And that's a
we
discussion
preface
with the
this-
principal, really.
Yeah, it
I mean,
is.
it's,
Maybe that's the preface of the survey, is to use it as a tool for the principals to have discussions with their teachers as opposed to making changes to the policy the way it's existing.
yeah, and I think even the teachers can talk to each other on PD days or something. Maybe they talk about homework on one of those PD days and talk about how much do I give, how much do you give, is it similar or not? I know Tom Landers at the PAC meetings talks about that too. He gets them together and they talk about what do they do.
Right.
And sometimes that helps people
So-
on one extreme get a little bit closer to the
So I
middle.
think maybe, if a survey's done, use it as a tool that the principals can take back to their staff in the meetings that they're having on those Mondays or on a PD day, to help further fine tune internally, but not, I just don't want it to be thought of as, okay, well, we're gonna radically, we're gonna give our input and we're gonna expect radical changes. I think more of an evaluation tool or a teaching tool for an internal mechanism, I think that would be more effective.
I think it depends on what this survey shows too. I mean, it's hard to
Right.
know right now what it would.
Right. Michelle?
I was suggesting it as a way of taking a temperature and gathering feedback and again, using it as a tool, not,
I mean, I think it makes sense to do that. personally.
John?
Most of my experience is with the high school. And one of the things I think I would encourage people to do is, in the elementary school, start off with some kind of notion of study time, like from 7 to 9 for elementary students should be school-related time. No TV, unless there's something really, important on there. And very little that's on television is important in my book. But it's just to develop the habit of study time, so that when you hit a teacher, for example, if you're teaching history or teaching chemistry, I think you have to do homework, just so you can keep up with what's going on in the classroom. You can't possibly cover it all. The teacher can't cover it all, so you've got to do some, so you come in with questions, et cetera. But it would be created by that 2 hours of study time. That just inculcate the whole idea that from 7 to 9, I don't want to dictate to parents about how to run their household, but I guess I do. I want to suggest, move in this direction, because it's good to develop that sense of discipline early. And then they can handle the teacher who's heavy on the homework and those who are light on it. Because teacher style is different. I think like in English, teachers might have a little bit more wiggle room. But history, chemistry, physics, the sciences, you need homework. My 2 cents.
Anyone else? Any other questions for Marie?
On a different part?
Sure, you just keep going.
I just have questions.
No,
I'm sorry.
that's fine.
On the social, I'm going to professional practice, and I'm looking at the social emotional curriculums that they're talking about during the PD time. And I know that the three of us sat in the PTO meeting at Blueberry the other day, and we were talking about, we learned about
Peacemakers.
Mind Up and Peace Builders, and they're talking about bringing those into the school and using parts of Mind Up right now in the K through 2 and 3 through 5. I guess they're starting in all the grades. And I know that at Center School they're using Peace Builders, and Blueberry is considering Peace Builders, which Center School paid for with their PTO, and Blueberry is trying to figure out how to fund that. I don't know what Wolf Swamp is using at this time, but I do remember Peter was looking at something last time I heard him speak about it. I'm wondering if there is a kind of unified mindfulness or social emotional curriculum that the district is looking at. If the schools are going to be asked to fund them separately. I know at one point there was maybe a social emotional curriculum subcommittee. Is there still a subcommittee that's looking at that stuff?
You know, Wolf Swamp has completely chosen Responsive Classroom, and Center's using Peace Builders, and Blueberry's using pieces of a couple of different systems, and with the goal of making a choice for a curriculum for next year. And I think you just summarized all of that. All of the curriculums that we've looked at together have the same goal in mind, the standard kind of language to use with kids, and mindfulness and peace building and those kinds of things, but we haven't dictated to the schools that they need to use one common curriculum.
We had that discussion with the principals that we were headed in different directions because Wolf Swamp had put together a committee that looked at social emotional. A lot of it's based around Responsive Classroom. At the same time, Donna had a committee going. So it was one of those initiatives where we knew we needed a lot of work in that area, or our students were really struggling. But we decided that they could each do their own program, because to bring them back and to have them undo that work would really undermine what the staff has done. But the goals are the same, and in terms of reaching students and reaching out to make sure that their needs are taken care of, these programs do that.
So did we fund the Responsive Classroom? Is that something that?
Yeah, we did, through a grant.
Through a grant?
Yep.
Like a LEAF grant?
No, Title I.
A Title I grant.
And then I think Neil funded some of it himself last year with his budget.
Oh, out of
And he may have gotten leaves, I don't know, prior to
I don't
this year, but I
think
don't know,
we
you maybe, yeah.
did any social emotional.
And some of his staff were already trained in Responsive Classroom.
The school had done an initiative on that back when I first came.
Way
A couple of
back.
years, we paid the teachers to go through Responsive Classroom.
Is there anything going on in the middle schools? Because I haven't been to one of their meetings.
Advisory is now in both schools. That was something we worked on 2 years ago. Glenbrook asked for a year so that they could develop curriculum and write it, and this year it went in to both schools. So we're very happy to see that working. There's one staff member that has a small group of students that meets weekly with that staff member.
Anything else that I forgot about that? You guys were both there.
Oh,
I can't. I don't think I think I've got it all.
anything else?
Is that something that's being discussed at the finance subcommittee meetings? No.
What, advisory?
No, funding,
Oh, funding.
some sort of
Funding
social
it.
emotional curriculums. I'm just trying to figure it out.
I mean, because the issue is really Center was able to get it through their PTO.
Right.
But that means you still had the Wolf Swamp, Blueberry schools, and do we make them the same, or could they be different? How do we fund it? So-
It's one of the dilemmas with new initiatives. You don't want to undermine a new initiative. So the funding sometimes comes from different sources. When it's a full throttle study like the math, it's easier to say the district will pay for it. But
Yeah.
if there's problems with funding, Marie should bring it back to us and we'll talk about it internally.
Yeah, I think it was more just a general discussion, really, but
Right. Yeah, I just.
something. It's one of those areas where maybe the curriculum could be different or the program could be different because it's different schools and they have different needs. But we should probably talk about it at the committee level at some point, probably not tonight.
You don't want to stay till midnight.
No.
All right, anything else for Maureen? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We do have warrants. Sorry.
I move that the school committee approve the warrant batch number 2200 in the amount of $66,950.87, funded, dated January 29th, 2016. Oh, I said it wrong. Approve the warrant batch number 2200 of the, what funded?
School.
School lunch, sorry, school lunch fiscal year 16 dated January 29th in the amount of $66,950.87.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
I move that the school committee approve the batch number 3086 of the general fund FY16 dated January 29th, 2016 in the amount of $545,551.93.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
I move that the school committee approve the minutes to the January 11th, 2016 school committee meeting as presented.
Got a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would like to commend our note taker for the good job done. That was a difficult meeting to cover. But thank you.
All right, any other, Russ?
On the top of page 5, there's one comment I made about, I would like to have a discussion solely regarding full-day kindergarten. He stated that this is an important topic and the public may want to be present. I also said that it should be on the agenda. It should be listed on the agenda.
Any other corrections, additions, deletions?
As amended?
As amended. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Okay. Before we adjourn into executive session, I just do want to, make sure that everyone is aware, at our last meeting, we had filed for a continuance or an extension on time for the open meeting law violation filing with the attorney, our response to the Attorney General's office. Our attorney has now put together the letter that is being sent, which outlines the complaint and all of the steps that have been taken to correct that, including now the 2 meetings that were held on January, whatever that date was, 22nd, which will now be filed as a response to the Attorney General, or to the complainant and the Attorney General's office. So that is being sent, dated tomorrow. And then it is up to, I know the question is, that people have asked, is what happens next? Does that mean that the complaint goes away? And that is in the hands of the complainant. We have responded as required by law. We have redone the meetings. At the last meeting, it was indicated that the complainant was going to withdraw the complaint once those meetings had taken place. To date, we have not yet heard anything, so it is, at this point, we have legally fulfilled our legal requirement, and we are now waiting to hear from the, either the Attorney General or the complainant. Russ?
So my understanding was that it was due today, so do we send it to him today?
Can we get an
What is
extension?
today's date? I'm sorry. Yes, it is dated today. I do apologize. It is dated today.
So did we send it out today? Do we know? Hopefully.
Michael did not indicate to me. I just got this from Attorney Foskett.
So what was what is the attorney's response? Is it that we walked through, did the preliminary screening committee meeting again?
It was regarding the 2 meetings, the complaint regarding the 2 meetings of the preliminary screening committee on December 2nd, December 12th. After review, it appears that on each occasion, the rules regarding executive sessions were violated in one respect. Both occasions, there was a failure to post the executive session in advance, including a statement of the specific purpose. Although it was intended that each session be properly posted, it appears that this did not occur due to a misunderstanding by the employee who normally attends to the posting. This was unintentional, and there was no intent or effort to conceal the session or its subject matter. In fact, each meeting was convened in open session. The chair stated the specific purpose of the executive session, i.e. to consider or interview applicants for the position of superintendent. The chair stated that holding the meeting in open session would have a detrimental effect in obtaining qualified applicants, and by roll call vote on each occasion, the committee went into executive session. Otherwise, it does not appear that there was a violation. At the December 2nd meeting, information regarding 9 applicants was presented to the committee by the consultant who had been retained by the school committee to conduct the search. The committee was never comprised of a quorum of the school committee, and there was discussion of the criteria for narrowing the applicants to those who would be interviewed, resulting in 6 names chosen for interview. During the December 12 meeting, the committee interviewed the 6 candidates and voted by roll call to submit 3 finalists to the school committee for interview. As you know, the preliminary screening process may consist of several preliminary steps, such as the consideration of written applications or resumes, selection of some for further consideration, and interviews for the purpose of narrowing the field of candidates to 2 or more finalists. And then the citation is quoted. One of the 3 finalists withdrew their name before school committee interview. The other 2 were then interviewed in open session by the school committee, and 1 candidate was chosen. As you know, following the filing of the complaint, you had discussions with a representative of the school committee regarding a possible resolution of this matter. As a result of those productive discussions, the committee agreed to your reasonable request to resolve the complaint by causing the school screening committee to reconvene and to hold a properly posted executive session to screen out candidates. It is my understanding that this occurred on January 22nd, 2016, and that the process is now proceeding in open session. Accordingly, the following steps have been taken or will be taken regarding your complaint. The school committee will commit to compliance in the future with open meeting law requirements, including posting with respect to itself, subcommittees, and special committees, and will take steps to ensure that staff are assisted in following through on these requirements. Number 2, the school committee has caused the screening committee to reconvene in a properly posted executive session to conduct the preliminary screening of candidates. 3, the executive session minutes of the December 2nd and December 12th meetings will be reviewed and approved for release with the redaction of names and identifying information of those candidates who were not selected as finalists pursuant to the provisions of Mass Public Record Law, quotation of the law. Thank you for your assistance in working with us, and please let us know if you have any questions. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so one thing is, I thought many of us were pretty clear that we didn't want to single out any particular person for, so I
Okay.
think there's kind of a, I think with anything like this, as I said in the past, you end up with a kind of, it's a systemic failure because we didn't have a process to prevent it. So that's one thing. But the second thing is I think we should add that we want Mr. Foster to respond in writing as soon as possible, that if that's acceptable, so we can move forward with Marty O'Shea.
His responding would be by withdrawing his complaint from the Attorney General's office.
And what I'm saying is I think we need to tell him that we really would appreciate a quick turnaround on this if this works for him so that we can move forward with Marty, because I don't want to wait the full 30 days for that to happen.
I would have to defer to Michael. He is the one who has been working with the attorneys on this. I'm just reading what was sent to me via an email. So I'm sorry I was not part of the
I'm not
working
saying
out
to
of the-
change the letter, I'm just saying, even today, I guess with me saying it on camera, I'm asking if we can have a quick response from the complainant so that we can If it's not acceptable, he could let us know that. If it's acceptable, then we can move forward with Marty O'Shea.
Okay. So, like I said, Michael was the one who had worked out
But
the,
if I could, Russ seems to be making a very common sense suggestion that, yeah, we nudge the complainant and say, we're in compliance, now it's your turn. And are we gonna do that? Instead of waiting for Michael, who I believe is in California?
I have not been involved in this case or working out any type of resolution with the complainant directly. I don't feel it appropriate for me to step in at this point because I'm not apprised of all the conversations and arrangements
Could
that
you
have been
talk to
made.
Michael and ask him to make that request?
I can. I will certainly ask him that. I do know that he has put in a phone call to the complainant and is still awaiting a response from last week, so I did ask him, I did ask Michael that when I spoke with him regarding what information I needed to present this evening.
Would you feel uncomfortable in calling Mr. Foster yourself?
Yes, because I don't know anything about the background or the arrangements that have been made. I was not asked to be a part of that. I don't have the information to be part of it. So no, I don't feel comfortable. I'm sorry.
So if we can just make sure that did go out today, for one thing, the response.
It is dated today.
Okay.
I will email Attorney Foskett and verify.
Does it get mailed or
Foskett could
emailed?
call Foster, the complainant, directly.
So does it get emailed or
and
mailed
ask
now?
him. They've been talking to each other. Attorney Foskett could call him, because I know they've been talking. Yeah. The bottom line is I just want to get this moving along so we can, I don't think it's fair to have superintendent, if this is resolved, the quicker we can tell Marty O'Shea, the better.
I don't disagree. I just feel kind of caught in the middle here, so I'm happy to pass messages, but since I was not part of this original conversation and resolution, I feel that there will be things raised that I am not in a capacity to answer, so.
So let's have
I do
Attorney
apologize.
Foskett do it.
Okay.
He could call tomorrow.
I will email him to verify that the letter was sent today and that he contact the complainant via phone.
That'd be fine.
So I did just want to update the committee on that. I know it was not on the agenda, but I received this email this morning. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared it as quickly as I did receive it. So with that being said, we do have an executive session scheduled for today.
Need a motion?
I need a motion, please.
Move the school committee, no, excuse me. I move the school committee adjourn into executive session for the purpose of strategy as it relates to as it relates to non-union personnel. Superintendent Marty O'Shea, Director of Pupil Services Mark Oldenburg, and Assistant Superintendent for Learning Susan Bertrand, and to discuss strategy as it relates to pending litigation, to reconvene into open session. The motion requires a roll call vote.
So do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote?
Can I just comment? So I think there is some question about whether we're going to reconvene an open session on both of these topics. I'm fine with
Well,
waiting
there are
until
several
we-
topics in here. There's non-union personnel for the superintendent.
Yep.
There's pupil services and assistant superintendent for learning and pending litigation. So,
So I'm fine with holding any comment until we get to that point, but I do want to note there's some
Sure.
question on that.
sure, I understand that. But either way, we have to reconvene into open session
Yes.
for at least one of those,
Yes.
so.
When we reconvene, is it recorded?
No,
Okay.
no. So roll call vote,
Liz?
John Fitzgerald, yes.
Janet Robinson, aye.
Kim King, aye.
Michelle Grotzky, aye.
Russell Dupre, aye.
All right, so thank you very much. We will be meeting next Monday, February the 1st at 7 p.m. for the presentation of the budget. That meeting will take place in the BTC of Long Meadow High School, since there is a regularly scheduled select board meeting. Our meeting will be recorded. It will not be broadcast live, and I'm not sure when it will be up for viewing, but know that that is coming, and then our next meeting is the February the 8th at 7 p.m. in this room. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.